Good afternoon. The Joint Committee of Higher Education, House and Senate is called to order. Today's date is February 10th. And members, for those House members, I'm Terry Bonoff, Chair of the Senate Higher Ed, and I am proud to be chairing today with Representative Nornis. And so just for your information, the way that we have divided our chairing responsibilities is we're going to switch every hour. So as you can see, we're beginning at 3 o'clock and the gavel will switch at 4, and we'll keep doing that each hour, and we'll be here as long as it takes to get our work done. It did take a quorum to get started. We do have a quorum. What I'd like to do first is just review the rules, and members, you all have the rules before you. There are both joint rules that are in the rule book that we'll review, and then there's joint committee proceedings. The joint rules are that the joint committee must actually make recommendations for vacancies to the regents. It's in the rule that we will put forward a recommendation for each of the openings that we have before us. Nominations may be made only by committee members. A candidate other than those recommended by the RCAC may be nominated for consideration. He or she must receive support from at least 3 representatives and 2 senators. We will ask for a show of hands if there are additional nominees to consider. A roll call vote is called for recommendations. A candidate must receive a majority of votes from each body, the House and the Senate, to be recommended to the joint convention. So members, for example, if when putting all this together, somebody has a majority, that doesn't mean they go forward. We would have to have a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate for the candidate to go forward. With regard to the rules of today, so not the permanent rules, but the joint committee proceedings, we're going to go in numerical order of the 5 congressional districts that have openings. Each regent candidate will be asked to come to the table in alphabetical order by last name and be given 5 minutes for their opening statements. After regent candidates' introduction, they will return to the table together for a 15-minute question and answer period. 5 minutes will be added for each additional candidate that has been put forward. The congressional district's endorsement will then be announced. There will then be a roll of the joint committee put forward for a recommendation. So members, we are really very fortunate to have a wonderful slate of folks that have been recommended by the Regent Candidate Advisory Committee, and something was different this time than ever before, and that is legislators were actually appointed to the Regent Candidate Advisory Council. So I'd like to thank Senator Pratt, who's not yet present, but Senator Pratt was put on the Regent Candidate Advisory Committee. Senator Miller, as Republican lead, was to have been appointed, and he deferred to Senator Pratt. I also was on RCAC, and so I had the privilege of sitting through hours and hours and hours of deliberation and interviews. So I can tell you that the RCAC group as a whole works very, very hard. They have 6-year terms. They do their homework. They check people's backgrounds, their recommendations, and so what you see before you is a very thoughtful list. From the House, Representative Nornis, as well as Representative Pulowski, also were on RCAC. The House was in a different situation in that they were not in the middle of their session, they were actually just beginning a session, and so their time constraints were such that they were not able to attend as many of the interviews, but it was an interesting experience and one where I left with a great deal of admiration for the process. In addition, there were candidates who were very qualified who didn't get through that process, and you may see that today they'll be nominated, and so within the rules of the proceedings, they will have that opportunity, whether they came through that RCAC process or not, based on the joint rules. So before we begin, are there any questions on the rules or the proceedings before us? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did want to make sure I understood that the nominations process. And if you could just talk a little bit about that nominations process.
So we'll begin with the first congressional district once we begin our proceedings, when we're ready for that part. And so before we invite the candidates that have been recommended by RCAC, we will ask if there are any nominations from the committee. We'll entertain nominations and then we'll take a vote. In order to have the nomination be accepted, there will need to be at least 2 senators voting for that nomination and 3 House members. If that goes forward, then that person who was just accepted would go in line in alphabetical order, just as those who came through the RCAC process. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, before we begin with the first congressional district, we've asked that the chair of RCAC come before us and make a few comments. Mayor Ardell Bradel. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Brady.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and other members of the committee. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be here before you today. I am Ardell Brady. I'm the mayor of Rochester, Minnesota, and here today, though, as chair of the Regent Candidate Advisory Council. In essence, I think with what you've got before you, I probably am the warm-up act for the rest of the afternoon. But I was appointed to the council by the Senate in 2004, so this was my 6th session, if I can call it that, on the council. It was my first as a chair, and it's an honor to serve the University of Minnesota in this way. In addition to having season tickets for football, women's basketball, women's hockey, 32, 19, and 18 years respectively. Additionally, I've brought the University of Minnesota Marching Band to Rochester every other year for their concert for over 30 years, 15 times. So like many of the members of the RCAC, I bleed maroon and gold. I'm not wearing that today because just before I left, it's Wear Red for Women Day with the heart efforts that's going on. The Regent Candidate Advisory Council was created by the Legislature in 1988 and is established in statute to identify, recruit, and screen and recommend at least 2 up to 4 qualified regent candidates for each open seat on the board. The board consists of 12 regents, 8 from each of the 8 congressional districts, 4 at large, including one who is an active University of Minnesota student, 6-year terms, and this year there were 4 openings due to term limits in the congressional districts, 1, 4, 6, and 7. And with the passing of Regent David Larson in the fall of 2014, a partial 2-year term opened for the 3rd Congressional District. Governor Dayton could have appointed someone, but due to it being so close to the process that we were going through for the others, he deferred that appointment to the RCAC. Regent Candidate Advisory Council consists of 24 members appointed by the House and Senate to serve a 6-year staggered terms. And this year, first 4 legislators were also have served on the council. As you've heard, Senators Terry Bonoff and Eric Pratt and Representatives Gene Pulowski and Bud Nornis. The 2 senators participated fully, and while I was skeptical of that legislative participation on the council, I will say they behaved and were valuable additions to the group. Unfortunately, the 2 representatives, and Representative Nornis here, their legislative session, as was stated, had started and they had too many conflicts to really participate at the same level. But again, the senators' input was greatly appreciated. Their request was to not send 4 names forward, but 2. The RCAC is supported by a staff of the Legislative Coordinating Commission. Sally Olson, I'll give 5 stars. She does an amazing job to help us through this. Diane Henry Wagenstein, another, and also I want to say thanks to the University of Minnesota Alumni Association for their help in having a forum and getting the recruiting done. So the process begins in the summer this year, 2014, reviewing criteria for candidates, then beginning active recruiting on candidates in September. One of our members, Paul Taylor, who I know is here in the audience, did a lot of work on that. Their press releases, letters to the editor, mailings, direct contact with legislators, individual recruitment efforts made by the council members, and also direct contact with other organizations. We received a total of 34 applications this year, and on December 12th, we met to discuss the resumes of those 34 applicants. 6 hours later, open meeting, it's all recorded, we selected the 19 finalists to interview. A council member then was assigned or volunteered to, for each of those people to do the reference checks, and a written account of those reference checks was provided for the council. Then on January 5th, 6th, 7th, we interviewed each of the 19 45-minute interviews, full day, and on the 8th, we met to determine the candidates to send to the legislature. Voting is done anonymously, but the results, of course, are public. Multiple votes to determine the two for each district based on the number of our CAC members this time voting. The successful candidate had to receive at least 11 votes on the first or second ballot. One of the 10 excellent and fully qualified candidates has withdrawn from the process, and so we trust the legislature will recognize and honor the work of the RCAC by electing any one of the 9 remaining recommended candidates as regents. And they are, again, that we finished our work with. First district was Dr. Claire Bender, who withdrew, Randy Simonson. Third district was Dr. Michael Belzer and Paula Prahl. The fourth district is Richard Beeson and Tom Sorrell. Sixth district is Michael Shue and Steve Laraway. And seventh district, Tom Anderson and Mike Yost. So in closing, the members of the RCAC take their responsibility very, very serious. And is the expectation for the candidates, we have a commitment to the University of Minnesota and an understanding of its role in education, economics, and innovation in the state, nation, and world. Our members were committed to the RCAC process and dedicated to the mission of the university and finding the absolute best candidates. As chair, I was very impressed with the depth of questioning and engagement of each and every member. Different members have varying areas of expertise, and their questions reflected that. I'm very proud of our work and the love, if you will, with Valentine's Day coming for the University of Minnesota. I believe the individuals submitted and people who can make a difference for the university. I also want to thank all 34 applicants for their willingness to volunteer and serve. They were all seriously evaluated. Go Gophers. Thank you very much.
Mayor Brady, thank you very much for your work, and please share our appreciation with all the members of RCAC. And as has been stated, it was an honor to participate, and so I now know firsthand just what high-quality work you all do.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Before you leave, any questions for Mayor Brady? And Senator Pratt, you were singled out and thanked for your work on the RCAC as well.
Thank you. Good.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
So now we move to our Congressional District number 4. This one's a little more, number 1, I don't know why I said that. Congressional District number 1, this one's a little more complicated because, as has been stated, Dr. Claire Bender has withdrawn. So currently, who we have before us is Randy Simonson. Are there any nominations? Representative Norton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to put the name of Patty Simmons, current regent, into nomination.
And because I know there were 2 people who wanted to, is there a second to comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would second that nomination. I think it's important that we have this opportunity, especially with the change in the process. So certainly appreciate the RCAC process, and just know that without Dr. Bender, we certainly need that medical perspective. So I'd like to second that nomination.
Very good, thank you. So there has been a nomination put forward of bringing somebody who was not put through the process, Dr. Patty Simmons. All those who are in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. Well, members, there were enough to comply with that rule, so Dr. Patty Simmons is now part of who will be considered in the first district. Are there any other motions?
Madam Chair.
Senator Sparks.
Madam Chair, thank you, and I think that you explained what happened in the first district is a little bit unique, and obviously we heard from Mayor Brady that typically we do appreciate the work of the RCAC, but at this time I would like to nominate Randy Demmer.
Very good. Representative Randy Demmer has been put forward. Is there anybody else? Yes, go ahead.
I'll make the second.
Very good, thank you. A second has been put forward. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, raise your hand. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Very good, so there are the requisite hands raised. Randy Demmer has been put forward. Are there any other nominations? Okay, Randy Demmer will approach the testifying table first as we are going in alphabetical order. So we do have a 5-minute rule, and Callie, who's the legislative assistant for Representative Chair Nornes, will be doing the timekeeping, and we're not going to be hard and fast, like stop you in the middle of a sentence, but she will let you know when your time's winding down so you can begin to wind up your comments. Thank you, Representative Demmer.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Chair, members. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, the opportunity to be in front of you. It's a great honor and it's a privilege to even be a part of this process. First of all, a little bit of my background. I'm from Hayfield. Hayfield's a small town of 1,300 people. If you know where Rochester, Owatonna, and Austin are, Hayfield sits in between that triangle in the middle there. It's a small farming community. I grew up in Hayfield. I still live in Hayfield. My wife is a local product. I went to Hayfield High School, and I'm very proud to be from there. My background is I graduated from the University of Minnesota back in 1980. Went to the College of Liberal Arts, transferred from there to the College of Business, which is now Carlson, and from there I transferred to the College of Agriculture. And that's where I got my, of course now that is the College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Sciences. I got my degree in Agricultural Business Administration, moved back to Hayfield, went into business. I started farming. I raised corn and soybeans 18 years, was involved in my dad's farm equipment dealership for a few years. Then I started another company selling computers and accounting software when we still had great big computers and 8-inch floppy disks. For those of you who know what those are, that was quite a treat. And I had that business for 20-some years. We did bookkeeping and that sort of thing. And I started an Napa Auto Parts store in Hayfield. And I expanded in 2 other communities and stores there, and I did that for 20 years. I guess the bottom line, and I was part of many other businesses in town. We lost our hardware store in Hayfield. I was part of a group of people that started up another hardware store. My background with the auto parts was natural. You know how to do inventory. You know how to work with these things. So I did that. Had a car wash in Hayfield. I did that sort of thing. And then I had an opportunity to participate in lots of boards, lots of things in my local community, highlighted by my time on the school board in Hayfield. I spent 11 years. Again, my alma mater. I had children in the school, lots of things going on. It's a bit dicey for a local businessman to be on the school board, but I did it because it was important. It was important public service. And quite frankly, I don't mind being in a position making those tough choices, those tough decisions that you have to make when you're talking governance. We had changes during the time. I was 11 years there. After that, I had an opportunity to, I'd never been interested in politics before, was approached about being a state representative, and I said, well, if I can figure out how to do that, that might be interesting. And so I talked to my wife and thought, what a great adventure. And indeed it was. I spent 8 years here in the House, primarily working in K-12 education, both finance and policy, those 8 years. Since that time, I've gone back into business. I'm now a partner in a construction company based in Winona, and we build commercial, industrial, and institutional type things. I'm not a construction guy myself, but as my partner said, I got construction people. I need somebody in the business end, so that's what I've been doing. My interest in being a regent at the University of Minnesota stems again for very similar reasons to why I've done all the other things I've done. I've been part of organizations that have needed people to step in and become part of governance. I think I have things to offer with my perspective, my background, my experiences. The university is a very large system. There are 5 campuses, one in Rochester, a brand new one, Crookston, of course, Morris, Duluth, all have their unique characteristics, their own unique culture. And I think as we look at those unique characteristics and culture, I think the wisdom of having a board of regents with people from all around the district with all different perspectives and ideas and ways of seeing things is very important. And I think my perspective as a Main Street business guy, is somebody who is from the rural areas and quite frankly from a background and a perspective of having worked on statewide issues, I think could be a great asset and a great contribution to the board. So that is my my quick and dirty on the Regent thing. I'm honored to be part of this process. I would really appreciate the opportunity to go and work on behalf of the university. I'm proud of it. I'm a lifetime member of the Alumni Association, a supporter, season ticket holder for a long, long time, except some of the time when I was farming and I couldn't get away. But it'd be an honor to be a part of that university and continue on making it the kind of excellent institution that it is, both for students and for research. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll cut off before I get the cutoff.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for coming before us today. We appreciate it. And just as people remember, we're going to bring them all back together for our question period. So now, next is Dr. Patty Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr.
Dr.
Chair,
Simmons.
members of the committees. My name is Patty Simmons. I live in Rochester, Minnesota, and currently serve on the Board of Regents of the University of Minnesota. I was not planning to run for another term, but I'm a public servant like you. And when things changed and we lost a couple of major attributes in our candidates, I felt a responsibility to respond to the request that I consider continuing as a regent. I come with a background as follows. I grew up on a farm. My education gave me great opportunities in life, so I deeply value education. I'm a physician. I was a physician. I was a physician, an academic physician, and a leader in health policy at the Mayo Clinic until I retired on December 22nd of this past year. The beauty of that retirement is actually I have a lot of things I can now put my time to, and most importantly, should I continue on the Board of Regents, I have now eliminated what was a conflict of interest or a perceived conflict of interest, so I can now engage really helping govern the medical school, the academic health center, this critically important component of the university, so important to the people of Minnesota. I believe the university's mission is one we must support because we care deeply as public servants about the quality of life in Minnesota, about the quality of the economy, and I can help the university fulfill that promise to the people of Minnesota through my governance role. I bring experience, I bring passion, I bring expertise, and I believe I bring credibility. I can tell you and be glad to share with you what I've accomplished as a regent, but I want to tell you what I think are important perspectives of others. I am here because people who are leaders in our state asked me to please consider, given the changed circumstance. I've been asked by legislators whom I respect deeply, who are left a bit in a new position, unanticipated, with the withdrawal of a finalist who brought certain qualifications. I've been asked by leaders in the business community who know me well. I am a great supporter of business in Minnesota and the economy. I was a member of the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce Board, the Minnesota Business Partnership, Greater MSP, the Itasca Project, and I've resigned from those positions as I left a Mayo Clinic. I bring an experience in education that's deep and transcends all the layers. I've been an advisor in the local public schools in Rochester, in the community college. I value deeply what our community colleges and technical colleges and MNSCU bring to our state and love our opportunities for collaboration and supporting their work as well. I've had the chance to lead searches for top executives in Minnesota, which I believe is a service to our state. I led the search for the president of the University of Minnesota, and of all the things that accomplished, getting to know and listen to and learn Minnesota was an incredible gift. I traveled all over this state and met with people from all walks of life and learned what they need and expect from the university. And I'd like to help continue to have the university deliver on its mission. I believe in your process. I believe in the critical importance of the legislature selecting the regents. You give us credibility when you do that. I believe in the RCAC project process, and I was part of it. I was endorsed by RCAC the last time I ran. This has all come up suddenly after the fact, so I didn't have that opportunity, which I must tell you is enriching as well. You learn a lot from people and about education and the needs of Minnesota in that process as well. So it is an apology that I didn't go through RCAC this time, but assure you I went through and sailed through very nicely last time, and believe I still would again. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for considering my candidacy. Please understand I do this out of a sense of great responsibility to help the university fulfill its mission to the people of Minnesota and use its assets, including the money of the people, the public, and the money of the students and the families. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simmons.
Thank you.
Next, we have Randy Simonson. Welcome,
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam Chair.
Simonson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the committee. I'm Randy Simonson. I'm from Worthington, Minnesota. This has been quite a process, but if nothing else comes out of it, what I've learned is a new respect and appreciation for my state legislators. You guys are crazy busy. And each one that I've met individually, I really appreciate the devotion and that you have to your job. Every one of you are very committed, and so it's given me a whole new appreciation for my state legislature. So thank you. My wife, Susan, and I have been, and our family have been closely connected to the University of Minnesota for many years. We recognize and value the importance of this institution to ourselves, to our neighbors across Minnesota, to the world. I did my PhD there. My son did his master's in public health there. He went to medical school there. He did his residency in radiology there. He currently serves as an assistant professor in the department while he's working at the VA. My daughter did her undergraduate work there in history, and she's currently finishing her PhD in New York. My other son, my second son, did his work in the arts as well, but he did it in the Minsky system, graduating from Mankato. In addition, my wife and I have had the privilege of starting a scholarship in the name of my major professor, Sam Maheshwaran. I've been also served on a number of committees. I've served on the Dean of the Vet Schools Advisory Committee. I've served on an endowed chair committee. I've worked in curriculum review for the College of Biological Sciences. I've hired many graduates from the University of Minnesota into my businesses, both at an undergraduate level, BS level, up through professional levels and PhD levels. I've sent employees from my businesses to further their education at the University of Minnesota, and I've sent them to workshops. I've employed summer interns over the years into my business to help them with their training, both at the graduate level and undergraduate level. I've supported and participated in many research projects at the University of Minnesota. In 2001, I was awarded the Distinguished Researcher of the Year for contribution in animal health from the College of Veterinary Medicine. I'm a lifetime member of the Alumni Association, and my wife and I make annual contributions personally as I do with my companies as well. So I'm here today because I care about the University of Minnesota. In addition, my business experience, I think, is relevant to what we're talking about here. I'm in the animal health business. I've helped start and sell 2 businesses in Worthington, Minnesota. Both those businesses are still there and employing employees. I've just recently started a 3rd. Okay? I've worked with universities around the world. I've worked with regulatory agencies around the world. I've done global business relationships that I think can bring value to the board. I have budgeting experience, just to name a few. On the volunteer side, I currently work as an advisor in the Minshew system at our local college with the president there, as she wanted input from industry on how we could better train our students at that level. So I work there. And in Worthington, if you don't know, the demographics have changed dramatically. We currently have about 51, 52 different dialects, and I've had the opportunity to work closely with many of those through something that you may not be as familiar with, and that's the drug court. Because many of the folks have gotten themselves into issues, and sometimes they don't know a better way of addressing some of this stuff. And so I feel that the University of Minnesota has an opportunity to address our changing demographics in a different way, through outreach, through the extension service, anyway, to education, as I've said many times, many of you may have heard me, provides hope for the hopeless. And so with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. So you might as well wait there, Mr. Simonson, because we'll bring the other two back. And so members for this group, so normally we would have for two, we would have 15, and since we have three, we'll have 20 minutes for questioning. So it's now 3:30. We'll have questioning, and we can end early if there aren't questions, but we'll stop the questioning at approximately 10 to 4. So who would like to begin the questions? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regent Simmons, there's been a written or unwritten rule about serving 2 terms, and you've served your 2. So can you talk about how this might break precedent in seeking a 3rd term?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Madam Chair,
Dr.
Mr.
Simmons.
Chair, Committee. First of all, it's kind of nice to be part of a Randy sandwich. Enjoying this position.
That was good.
Thank you. That's an important question. And initially, I intended to serve my 2 terms and move on to other ways of serving the public, because I believe in public service. There is no law or rule about term limits for regents. Historically, regents have served multiple terms and multiple years. In the past 15 to 18 years, that has not been common or encouraged, but it has certainly happened a number of times in the past.
Thank you.
Yes, Representative Gruenhagen.
Okay,
So I want to
thanks,
make sure I
Madam Chair.
say it right. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things I see as a regent is, being a board of governance oversight. And I guess it'd be a question for all 3. To what degree do you have experience in fiscal analysis of educational institutions and drawing conclusions and being able to make recommendations to the chancellor or the president of the university, especially in terms of efficiency and bringing about a focus on, you can't be all things to all people. You have to focus your goals and desires, I think, in education in certain areas. If you'd care to respond to that.
And all questions are for all candidates. So we'll begin with Mr. Simonson.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very important question. I looked at President Kaler's fiscal year report. I was very pleased to see that he held the line on tuition for in-state students. I think that's very important. But going forward, and I also looking at some of the things he did with administrative costs. But I agree wholeheartedly with you that we can't be all things to all people, even though we're global. I think we need to partner more with other systems where they have more expertise. We don't need to create a whole new department. My experience as far as education, I've worked with local boards in Worthington, and obviously on the committee I've had with the veterinary school. We certainly look at some of the financial aspects. And then my business experience, I think, has given me a lot of financial expertise as well. But I'm very interested in the concept that we're a land-grant university and that we need to serve our Minnesota residents, and the cost of tuition is out of line, I think, and we need to do something about that. And I think there's ways to do it.
Dr. Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative. I'd like to answer that with two sets of pieces of information. I'll begin with the University of Minnesota. When I led the search for the president, I made it very clear that we needed a president who came in, who understood we had to take out costs and we had to control tuition. And that was absolutely, those were criteria I believed in, but also learned during the discovery phase, listening to Minnesotans, how important it was to them. I am a pediatrician. I see largely adolescents, and I see college and university kids and their families, so I hear it very close to my heart. At the university, I'm leading the initiative on the behalf of the board on looking at principles, policy, philosophy of tuition and aid. I firmly believe that when we look at the cost of education and look at the distribution of the resources to deliver, we start with what does Minnesota need? And Minnesota needs a lot of things, and we need to figure out what the priorities are, and I've worked hard on that. Then the other perspective I'll share with you is when I was working at Mayo Clinic. I was on the Board of Trustees, the Board of Governors. I was at the management level before that and the operational level before that. We are a $10 billion complex national, international organization dealing with one of the worst marketplace realities, that is healthcare, and learning how to take out costs but maintain mission, maintain principles and values, and prioritize was a key part of what I did at Mayo Clinic. I'm on other governing boards where I hold the administration accountable very carefully, very clearly. Thank you.
Representative Demmer.
Well, my experience with financials is multifaceted. Of course, in the business world and as the principal and the owner of businesses and needing to get financing, you have to be very, very good at putting together financial statements, explaining financial statements to lenders and that sort of thing. So from a private sector business standpoint, I'm very fluent with income statements, balance sheets, that sort of thing. From there, 11 years on a school board. I spent a lot of time pouring through financials on our school board and trying to look at finances. We passed a bond referendum when I was there, and lots of analysis about what that might need, and of course annual audits and that sort of thing as you go through and analyze those, so experience with schools. And then the legislature. When I came into the legislature in the year of 2002, 2003 was my first year. It was announced to us in February a $3 billion budget forecasted deficit. And in the K-12 Finance Committee, we spent many, many evening hours pouring through documents, pouring through budget analysis of the system. And so I spent a great deal of time working on the state of Minnesota type budgets as we looked at different sectors. I can tell you that fund accounting for an organization like a state, an organization, and I'm serving on other boards now, that our church council, for example, is a financial statement. Fund accounting for nonprofits is a totally different thing than accounting for businesses. But the fundamental process of understanding where money is going, where your assets are, and how things are shaping up as you look back and look forward are very similar. In my mind, it's about trying to find value, and value is a big part of what we're trying to create for students and for researchers at the University of Minnesota. That's not a budgeting issue, but it's something we look for as we look at investing our dollars.
Thank you. Next. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have a question about something that I think is a key critical mission of the university, and that is research. We're depending upon research to help our state and our families throughout this state as we deal with the aging baby boomers and all of the increased risks that come with that. And we rely on the University of Minnesota for a lot of that research. And so I'd like to know a little bit about your experience with research, and particularly then, how do we go about commercializing that intellectual property? I think that's an important aspect too. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts on that or experience in that area.
Representative Demmer.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Research, of course, is a huge responsibility of a land-grant university such as the University of Minnesota. My experience particularly starts with probably the extension system. Again, my experience going back to the mid-2000s when the extension system was changed. That is about research for our agricultural producers, for people who are gardening, for people who are basically relying on the university for information. There was a big change when it went from county-based extension to regionally based extension. I was a supporter of that change primarily because we allowed a lot of expertise and a lot of information to be in one central location where everybody from horticulturalists to farmers to family gardeners could go and get information, that kind of research. Obviously, we know about Minnesota and its apples, so that's, again, part of agricultural research. I think that it's extremely important that we find that balance between the teaching and the research end of it. I think there's a lot of value in the teaching side that comes from the research, in addition to what we gain from intellectual property. I quite frankly believe that in addition to tuition, intellectual property is an area that I'd like to see looked at very closely in terms of what the university can gain from that. We can be helpful to the institution as well as students. Obviously, not having been there, I have to peel away the layers of the onion to find out how we can do that. But I think in the back of my mind that's something I'd really like to look at it if and when it becomes a regent.
Thank you. Mr. Simonson.
Research is something very near and dear to my heart. I've spent a big part of my career on the research side before I started developing companies with partners. And I've been very outspoken about this as I've served on different committees. I like to look at this in a couple different ways. One is from the integrity standpoint. The money for research, as you know, public money has become very difficult. Money from the USDA, money from other groups has become very difficult to get. And our researchers have publish or perish mandates. And so what that has happened is they've had to go to private sources. And I've seen the good and the bad of that in my experience at the university and other universities. I've seen situations where companies will come in and research is done and the research doesn't really get out the door. I've seen situations where companies have bought intellectual property and the research doesn't get out the door because it competes with the current product. I think that's something that has to be addressed and more attention has to be paid for it. My little company, we had 145 people. I've sent millions of dollars to Germany for the rights to an intellectual property that was developed right here at the University of Minnesota. Now, did that help me grow my company? Yeah, it did. But I could have done a lot more if there would have been some way of acknowledging more economic development with that intellectual property here in Minnesota. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done. Absolutely. The other side is we tend to think of research in terms of the medical field or the veterinary field. And this one medicine approach right now I think is going a long ways to make that more efficient. But we need to think of research in terms of agriculture in a broader way. We're an agricultural state, whether we want to think of it that way or not. Okay, I said I had the privilege of sitting in on an Ag Finance Committee this morning. And they were talking about things like food safety, and they were talking things like pesticides and things about fertilizer. And the only thing I can think of is there's so many technologies that we can apply to that to make it more efficient, more sensitive. And they're there, and they're here in Minnesota. And we're an ag state, and I think we need to further our research on the ag side of our business. So with that, I'll...
Thank you.
Simmons.
Dr. Simmons.
Thank you. I'll begin with my background in research. In my recently retired profession, one of my responsibilities certainly was in research, and I was an NIH and National Science Foundation funded researcher. I wrote codes of ethics for Mayo Clinic and worked with IRBs at Mayo Clinic and other academic institutions, including Harvard. I now, if I return to the Board of Regents without any perception of conflict of interest, can better apply that experience and knowledge. The commercialization of intellectual property piece is so important, and I would make these two comments. One is recognizing your assets and what market they can go to is part of that endeavor, not just new discovery, but what do we got and how do we leverage it. At Mayo Clinic, I was the chair of the board of Mayo Medical Ventures, which is the new business development arm of Mayo Clinic. Under my board leadership, we generated the first $150 million net income back to Mayo, commercializing our intellectual property, and that's grown. At the University of Minnesota, I care deeply about the research mission and using that in extension about the engagement. What does Minnesota need to know? What are the questions being asked? How do we create the research programs to do that? And how do we continue to improve the quality of life with medical discoveries that reduce the burden of disease, with discoveries in agriculture that help feed the planet safely and economically? I could go on because I'm excited about this, but I'll bet you'd like for me to stop.
Thank you. Representative Norton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On Friday of last week, I took the opportunity to accept an invitation at the University of Minnesota to listen to the frontline workers and their concerns about their employment at the U. What I found were a lot of passionate employees who love the University of Minnesota. But there are concerns about their wages, their loss of benefits. And so I would like for you each to answer how you will balance the needs of the frontline worker, the people who are secretaries and groundskeepers and all those folks at that university who's keep the doors open, and the ever-growing administrative costs that we read so much about in the paper. How will you balance those and keep all of our workers happy?
And if the candidates would keep your answers as brief as possible, because there are more questions and we have 5 more minutes. So Dr. Simmons.
Thank you. First of all, an institution that is in the business of really serving public people must have a happy workforce. You're only as good as your workforce, and that therefore employee relations, employee compensation, and benefits are very important. I've worked hard at the university, particularly on the Faculty, Staff, and Student Affairs Committee, where we look at employee issues, in getting good union contracts, in trying to deal with the escalating healthcare costs and how we distribute those in an affordable way. I meet with employees from whom I learn a great deal at the university and elsewhere. Did most recently yesterday morning to understand things better from their perspective. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you.
I agree with
Mr. Simonson.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Madam. I agree with Dr. Simmons, but I think we're in a changing culture. I think the frontline workers need to be given consideration, but we need to look across the university as we're looking at cuts in expenses so that we can serve our state better and our students and deal with the tuition. So I don't think we can leave any department out. At the same time, I'm very sensitive to frontline workers.
Thank you. Representative Demmer.
Well, as in any organization, there's a hierarchy. The Board of Regents' job is not to negotiate those contracts per se. It's to provide guidance that the administration works in those things and hires people. We're competing with the private sector for people, and we need quality people. There's no question about that. So I would say we need to be commensurate with what the private sector is, making sure that we're negotiating and staying in line with what that is so we can get good people and the best people at the institution, as well as watching for creep as things tend to go higher. We seem to have a lot more people with titles and a lot more administration, and some studies have shown that. And I think in terms of looking at budget dollars, that's where we have to be careful that we don't let those dollars creep up, because the people doing the work every single day are extremely important.
Thank you. Next. Senator.
Sure, I'll ask a question. We talked a lot about diversity and engaging diverse populations, particularly when we were discussing, when we were talking with candidates in the 1st District. Wondering if you could provide your thoughts on how, with outreach being an important part of the University of Minnesota, certainly the events of yesterday, how you want to engage diverse populations. I don't know who's first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Demmer is first.
Well, this is also one of the questions from the Region Candidacy Advisory Council put forward, and my response at that time is we need to recruit people of all races, of all backgrounds, because it creates a rich environment. I've been active with foreign exchange programs, for example. We've hosted students in our home. We had 3 of them come and stay with us. And at a place like the university, it's so important that the students as well as the faculty be Very, very mixed, very, very diverse. That adds to the richness, it adds to the culture, it adds to the knowledge, and adds to the background. How do you accomplish that? You become welcoming. This is not just about the university and that institution. This is about society in general. We need to be welcoming. We need to be inviting people in and finding ways to create opportunities. If there's opportunity, people will come regardless of race or background or ethnic background.
Mr. Simonson.
I look around this committee and I don't see a lot of diversity, and I think that's going to change in the future. I live in an area where English second language is more than 50% of the grade school. And I've had the opportunity to interact with them on different levels. Probably the closest level is my wife and I have had the privilege of starting a recovery program, and we just bought a acreage for a safe, sober home for people getting out of prison, so on and so forth. But in that experience, what I found is the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I see whole families coming to our recovery program on Monday nights. We'll have 70, 80 adults, and we'll have whole families there. And the only thing I can think of when I look at these kids is that they didn't have a chance. They didn't have a chance. I know from my background, again, I'm not going to go into that, but my own testimony could talk to that level. And I think the university has the ability and the responsibility to reach out through different programs to show these children a new avenue that they can go at. They don't have to follow the same old pattern. And I'm very committed to that, whether we do it through extension or where my new business is. I interact, the extension office is there, I interact with them quite frequently. And I believe we have a responsibility to reach out to these young children and show them a new pathway.
Thank you. Dr. Simmons.
Thank you. First, on a personal level, as I have educated students and residents in medicine and groomed people to succeed me in my other responsibilities in my workplace, I brought forward a diverse pool of people who are succeeding beautifully. I couldn't be more proud of them. Second, at the university, it's a critical focus right now, and it's diversity defined broadly. Diversity of thought has to be embraced and welcomed and brought forward, not only gender as we think of and race and ethnicity. Also, critically important to engage first-generation students, anticipate the new demographics and try to tailor programs that are going to work. And you can't do that alone as a university or as an individual. You have to work with the public schools. You have to really work with a broader population. I'm committed to that. I have the head of diversity of the university coming for a committee hearing at my committee on Thursday.
Thank you. You know, members, before we move on, I wanted to say something on the record. I have been given receipt of the letter that former Governor Carlson wrote, and some members may have read it, some may not, but in that letter there were some pretty strong allegations of misconduct with regard to something that happened, 10 years ago, 2004. And so what was disturbing to me in this process is that I know that there's a legislative audit underway on this very subject. And so it concerned me that we were in a position to vote on regents, some of whom have been current regents, without having the opportunity to hear the legislative audit report. So it's probably not a surprise to people. I actually requested many different ways that we actually put this on hold and allow that to go forward, because that was upmost on my mind and of concern. There was not that consensus, and so we are here today. And so without having a report before me that has standing, so to speak, that is not a lay report, I'm going to put that aside and today vote on the facts. It's my hope that before the next stop that report is out there and we do have a chance to have a full discussion. But because I have made that very clear, I just wanted members to understand that it would have been my preference to do it the other way, but I will do my duty because it's required of us to vote, and I will do that and just put that aside. So that's it. I think, I guess if there's a 1-minute comment, just in wrap up to that, you're welcome to make that for anyone who would like to. Dr. Simmons.
Thank you. I would like to comment because I eagerly await the legislative auditor's report as well. Now that I've been able to not have any conflict and get to bring to bear my own research experience and medical ethics experience and IRB experience, I think it's a contribution I can make to the Minnesota, not just the university. I eagerly await that report, and now that I, as of December 22nd, don't work at Mayo Clinic, I have already asked the president to please work with faculty leadership so we can help understand the allegations better and know what the actions need to be. I believe the legislative auditor's report will tell us, have we had a thorough look? And I'm really eager for that. I called Governor Carlson earlier this month, and he hasn't returned my call, but I'm trying to learn more and engage in that important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the others don't need to say anything about it, but you're welcome to say a minute.
I read this, and I think that I read the newspaper article on it a while back, and my first thought was I feel bad for the families that had to relive this. But I think the integrity of the institution has to be withheld, and so I really applaud you for that legislative overview, and I respect what you're saying there.
Thank you. Representative Demmer?
Well, just to be not excluded, I think, Madam Chair, it's one of the roles of the Board of Regents is to provide that oversight. And the legislative auditor will be a very interesting report. They always are. And I think that that is a check and balance that we have in place that is necessary with all of our institutions, especially the public ones where we have public dollars, taxpayer dollars, as well as tuition dollars at risk and being used. So I look forward to that also.
Thank you very much. With that, you're excused. Good job, members, and yeah. So, members, given that we're 5 minutes to 4 and we were switching the gavel at 4, it makes sense to me that I hand the gavel over 5 minutes early and allow Chair Nornes to begin his chairmanship.
Thank you for the opportunity. We are now at the level or to the stage where we're going to vote. And just to review, it takes a majority of votes from the Senate and a majority of votes from the House in order to be the designated, I guess, the nominee.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, Senator Ortman.
Thank you. A question about the process. What happens
Thank you,
if
Chair.
the Senate or the House reaches a majority before the other body? And then do they continue to vote, or do they not continue to vote?
We would continue to vote.
So even if the Senate, Mr. Chair, reaches a majority and the House does not, on that next ballot, the Senate will also vote again?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, I should indicate there was no recommendation that came from the first district, because at the time there was only one candidate, so. Oh, yeah, Representative Pulowski would be from the first. Anything you have to say before we vote?
Mr. Chair, you have summarized it superbly.
Want to repeat it back to me? Is that?
Mr. Chair, I can tell you who to vote for, but that would be inappropriate.
Yeah, all right. So I think we're ready to vote, members. And you know the three members that are the three people we're voting for, who were just up front. So we will take it in that same order, I believe. So we will go in alphabetical order. And I should add also the person receiving the fewest votes would then be dropping out on the second round. And we'll proceed with that. So at this point, okay, this will be a voice vote?
No.
Well, if not there will be a roll. The roll will be called. And of the three candidates we heard from, you will then indicate your preference, and we will go from there. Who wants to go first? Okay, and the House will go first, so
Mr. Chair, we are going to start with the chair and then go alphabetically from there.
Oh.
So Representative Nornis,
Demmer.
Barrett,
Simonson.
Bernardi,
Patty Simmons.
Christensen,
Demmer.
Daniels,
Simonson.
Gruenhagen,
Simonson.
Heinzman,
Simonson.
Lean,
Simonson.
McDonald,
Demmer.
Norton,
Simmons.
O'Neill,
Simonson.
Pulowski,
Simonson.
Pugh,
Simonson.
Rosenthal.
Simon.
Can you repeat for clarification?
Simmons, I'm sorry.
Whalen,
Simonson.
Winkler,
Simmons.
Now on to the Senate. Senator Bonoff,
Simmons.
Clausen,
Simmons.
Eakin,
Simmons.
Franzen,
Simmons.
Kent,
Simmons.
Miller,
Demmer.
Nelson,
Simmons.
Ortman,
Simmons.
Peterson,
Simmons.
Pratt,
Simonson.
Sharon,
Pass.
Sparks,
Demmer.
Sharon,
Simmons. Simmons.
Oh, Simons.
Senator Sharon, can you repeat that for clarification?
Simonson.
Simons. Mr. Chair, in the House, Simonson received 9 votes, Demmer received 2 votes, Simmons received 4 votes. In the Senate, Simonson received 2 votes, Demmer received 2 votes, Simmons received 8 votes.
According to the rules, then, we would be left with Simmons and Simonson.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, I misspoke. In the House, Demmer received 3 votes.
All right. So we have Simons and Simonson as the 2 that are still in this process. And we will then take the roll call. Rosenthal?
Could you just repeat the totals, please?
Mr. Chair, members, in the House, Simonson received 9 votes, Demmer received 3 votes, Simmons received 4 votes. In the Senate, Simonson received 2 votes, Demmer received 2 votes, Simmons received 8 votes.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for, as I look at these vote totals, would you help me understand that if the outcome is that there has to be a majority of the votes on both a House and the Senate for the same candidate in order for a name to go forward?
That is correct.
Oh, I could-
Okay. Okay, okay. All right, we were correct when we indicated that the last two now that we'll be voting for will be Simmons and Simonson, because the rules are very clear on that. So are we ready again? Okay. You want to start?
Representative Nornis.
Oh, Simonson.
Barrett.
Simonson.
Bernardi.
Simmons.
Christensen.
Simonson.
Daniels.
Simonson.
Gruenhagen.
Simonson.
Heinzman.
Simonson.
Lean.
Simonson.
McDonald.
Simonson.
Norton.
Simmons.
O'Neill.
Simonson.
Pulowski.
Simonson.
Pugh.
Simonson.
Rosenthal.
Simmons.
Whalen.
Simonson.
Winkler.
Simmons.
For the Senate, Bonoff.
Simmons.
Clausen.
Simmons.
Eakin.
Simmons.
Franzen.
Simmons.
Kent.
Simmons.
Miller.
Simmons.
Nelson.
Simmons.
Simmons.
Ortman. Peterson.
Simmons.
Pratt.
Simonson.
Sharon.
Simmons.
Sparks.
Patty Simmons.
Mr. Chair, in the House, Simonson received 12 votes, Simmons received 4. In the Senate, Simonson received 1 vote, Simmons received 11.
You want to take over? Yeah, Representative Bernardi?
Mr. Chair, could I just verify, there are no proxies at this level
That
of
is
this
correct.
process, right?
Yeah. And I think, at least on the House side, I think we're pretty well represented.
Yeah, we have one off.
Yeah. So. We have no choice but to vote again. I mean, that's just the way it is. Yeah. Yeah. So. Members, I think at this point, in the interest of time, since we seem to be kind of deadlocked here for a while, we're going to move on to the next district. We'll just set this election aside. We'll return at a later time tonight. Early tonight, hopefully. Senator.
And Mr. Chair, members, it should be noted that it is in the law that we will forward a motion, so it can be a very long night, but I support the chair's motion that we might as well find consensus where we have it and keep going.
Cross your fingers, okay? We are moving on now to the 3rd district then.
We'll have to come back to it. Keep
The
going later.
candidates advanced to our committees tonight is Michael Velzer and Paula Prawl. Are there any other nominations?
Representative Pugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I would like to put the name of Darren Rocha into nomination.
Is there a second for that nomination?
Second.
Glenn Grunhagen? Then we need to take a vote by a show of hands. First of all, are there any nominations besides Darren?
We did that one first.
Oh, yeah. So show of hands, all of those who are supporting the nomination of Darren. Rocha? Okay. We have enough, so he is now among the candidates. Is there any other nominations? Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to nominate Bill Luther.
Okay, Bill Luther has been nominated. Is there a second?
Mr. Chair.
Is that Representative Pulowski?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Then again, with a show of hands, all of those that support the nomination of Bill Luther, show your hands. We got two over there? Okay, then we have enough, so we have Bill Luther also, so we have 4 candidates now in District 3. And, which, again, we'll go in alphabetical order. The first will be Belzer, followed by Luther, Prohl, and Rocha. So I'd like to ask Mr. Belzer to come forward. Dr. Belzer? Welcome.
Thank you.
Proceed.
Mr. Chair and committee members, good afternoon. I'm pleased and honored to be able to speak to you today. My name is Michael Belzer. I'm a native of Minneapolis, and for the past 25 years, I've served as the Chief Medical Officer at Hennepin County Medical Center and as a non-university employed Associate Dean of the University of Minnesota Medical School. At this unsettled time in the University Academic Health Center, I feel that my unique skill set and knowledge as a physician in academic medicine would serve the Board of Regents well. Even though I'm not employed by the university, I would like to be very clear that if I was elected as a regent, I would immediately resign the University Medical School Dean title as I disclosed in my application last fall. By way of introduction, I grew up in South Minneapolis, attended Washburn High School, received a BA in psychology at the University of Minnesota, and like my father, I went on to receive an MD at the University of Minnesota Medical School. I trained in hematology and oncology, and I'm a cancer physician. I'm married to Ellen Wolfenson, who's here today, who's a realtor, and we're the proud parents of a blended family of 8 children. Let me explain to you why a 35-year career in academic medicine has provided me with the knowledge and uniquely prepared me for service as a regent for the University of Minnesota. University of Minnesota Medical School and Academic Health Center represents 40% of the University of Minnesota's biennial budget. University Medical School has trained more than 70% of Minnesota's physicians and sees more than 1 million patients annually. Hennepin County Medical Center also has a robust commitment to medical education. We serve as one of 4 main teaching hospitals of the University of Minnesota, and at any one time we have 100 medical students, 300 residents, and 350 faculty training the residents. As head of all of our provider clinical programs, I signed my 10,000th annual resident certificate last December, unique and touching milestone for me, although it made me feel a little old. As the Chief Medical Officer for over 25 years, I've been a member of our senior leadership team, reporting directly to the hospital board of directors. I play a major role in strategic planning. I assist in the operation of the development of operational metrics, operations and budgets for our leadership team. Hennepin County Medical Center is a big institution with a $900 million budget and 6,000 FTEs. I've served for 25 years with hands-on experience in hospital operations and budget management. This year we had a $36 million turnaround between 2013 and 2014. And we had a reduction in our county tax support just this last year that will save Hennepin County taxpayers $14.3 million in 2015. My experience with aggressive administrative cost control and this experience can be valuable to the Board of Regents. In terms of board experience, I've had a several decade experience of significant volunteer board service, including being chair of the West Metro Medical Society that represented 4,500 physicians, chair of the National Public Health and Hospital Institute Board of Directors, executive committee of the Minnesota Visiting Nurse Agency, board chair of Hospice of the Twin Cities, and I certainly know the difference between governance and management. Acknowledgements, I've been blessed to receive the University of Minnesota Distinguished Alumni Award, University of Minnesota Mentorship Award, University of Minnesota Medical Foundation Distinguished Teaching Award, and finally the coveted Charles Bowles Rogers Lifetime Achievement Award for outstanding contributions to medical leadership. Organized Medicine supports my candidacy, the CEO of the Minnesota Medical Association, the CEO and chair of the Minnesota Hospital Association, the CEO of the Twin City Medical Society, the chairman of the board of MMA, and Senator David Dernberger, who is chair of the National Institute for Health Policy, have all written letters of support. Diversity and equity are key features of our patients and our effort at Hennepin County Medical Center. I'm the hospital's executive leader in promoting health equity and elimination of health disparities and the executive champion of diversity assessment for all our providers. Because of my work, I've been appointed to several national committees, including the American Hospital Association Equity of Care Committee. So in summary, the medical school and academic health center are critical to the future of the University of Minnesota. The Regents have recognized this, and this year instituted a special committee for academic medicine to oversee this large enterprise that occupies 40% of the budget. Additionally, the governor has recommended $230 million of support for the medical school based on the Blue Ribbon panel. I'm sure you read that Fairview University Hospital is unsettled with the recent resignation of their CEO. Clinical research oversight, as we've talked about, has been questioned in the press, and all this leads to several big unknowns for the university at this precise time. I think my broad healthcare policy knowledge, decades of hospital operations experience, close knowledge of the University Academic Health Center, and knowledge of clinical research compliance all uniquely qualify me to continue this legacy of Regent physician leadership. Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Dr. Belzer. Next, we have Bill Luther.
Well, thank you very much, Mr.
Welcome.
Chair, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here, to be back here before you after all these years. I'll be as brief as possible. I'm married. My wife is Janet Robert. I have 2 children, Alex and Alicia, and whose mother, Darlene, also served here in the legislature with you. Many of you may have known her and unfortunately passed away 13 years ago. I grew up on a family dairy farm in Minnesota. I've always felt that our family would have never thrived in the way that it did without the incredible opportunity the University of Minnesota provided us. There, I received both of my degrees, my Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from the Institute of Technology, and then my JD degree from the University Law School. My 2 brothers graduated with U degrees in Economics and Law, and my sister graduated from the U of M Medical School. So we received 7 University of Minnesota degrees in our family. While practicing business law in Minnesota, I went into public service with a deep appreciation for what the state had meant for our family, creating opportunities we had never envisioned. Along the way, I had enormous help from my family, friends, and supporters. I had the privilege of serving here in the Minnesota Legislature for 20 years, over a decade as the Senate Assistant Majority Leader and on the conference committees on the budget during those years. I also served on the Board of Directors of the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission for 6 years as we built Minnesota's amateur sports facilities around the state. I then had the opportunity to serve in the United States Congress for 8 years. I was on the committees on science, small business, and international relations, as well as the Energy and Commerce Committee that has oversight over our nation's health care. Throughout my public service, I always attempted to work across party lines, the Minnesota way, as I always called it. I worked with Congressman Ramstad on consumer product safety and Congressman Gutnick on budget reform. In the past 12 years since leaving public office, I've engaged in a a variety of consulting activities, ranging from working with businesses to mediating business conflicts at former Minnesota Supreme Court Justice Gilbert's Mediation Center. I believe the constructive team-building approach that I used in public office and now in business and mediation is what is needed on the Board of Regents. And as former Regent Chair Linda Cohen has told the Regent Advisory Council, they are not looking for regents with any one experience or expertise. Rather, they're looking for broad life experience, common sense, and independent judgment. And I believe after the experiences that I have in life, that's what I offer and bring to this position. I come from both a rural and metro perspective, spending lots of time back home on our family farm and with people there. I have a cross-section of experiences. I have no bias or agenda other than wanting the U to be everything that it can be. Besides the budget work over the years that I did, I also, 20 years ago, way before it was a national crisis, initiated the effort with lots of support from others to have the GAO study on rising tuition costs conducted in this country. And that was, as I said, 20 years ago, before it was the crisis that it is today. I mention that example because I believe good governance at the U, just like here, is taking on difficult issues, not kicking the can down the road. That's what I've tried to do in my years and what I believe is necessary on the Board of Regents, which finally brings me to why I'd like to serve as a regent. I'm not interested in building a resume or having something to do in retirement. I'm interested in giving back to the university that has meant so much to me, my family, and the people of this state. In fact, every chance I've had in my life, whether it was the GAO study that I mentioned to you or all of the meetings I held for high school students around my district, I've shown my commitment to access and affordability for all of the citizens of our state. And right now, I believe our state is filled with families like the family that I came from, and they want and deserve regents that have the courage, experience, and courage to stand up and fight for them. And that's what my candidacy is about. Finally, I'll just say that when I appeared before the Regent Advisory Council, I was told at that council that while I would make a terrific regent, they just could not recommend me because I had been a former legislator. And I simply say to you that any of you here could leave this institution, I believe, and have 20 more years as I have, and be excellent members and be properly prepared for the Board of Regents. But I think in addition to that, I think that misses the point. The issue here is what are we doing for the people of the state, not who gets to serve on the Board of Regents or sit in this seat. It's who's going to be there for the people of this state to make sure that it continues to be the kind of university that we have had and we have thrived with in this state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Luther. Next, we have Paula Prawl. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Chair. I'm very honored to be here and to have this opportunity. I want to tell you three things today, very simply: who I am, why I'm interested, and what I can add to the Board of Regents. To start with who I am, I'm Paula Prawl. I didn't say that at the beginning. And while I grew up in Iowa, I moved to Minnesota from Massachusetts, where I'd been working at a small college. It was a quintessential New England college, except it didn't have the wealth we associate with the schools there. In fact, it was struggling terribly. While I was young in my career, I had some terrific experiences there, and I had a real dose of the business of higher ed. We literally held our breath as the needed number of students arrived each fall. It was an important early lesson in fiscal management of higher ed. I moved to Minnesota 26 years ago to attend the Humphrey School at the U. Not long after I started, I was offered a role at the Minnesota Business Partnership. There I was the director of policy and spent much of my time on education policy. PSEO, public school choice, and charter school legislation comprised our agenda at that time. That combination of policy and business experience launched the next 2 decades of my career, with roughly a decade each at both Honeywell and Best Buy. In both places, I ran public affairs organizations, I managed communications and marketing functions, and I experienced and helped manage the great growth and change at each of them. I had a front row seat to large organization leadership. I'm now at a new role at Vardy Partners, a global investment firm here in Bloomington. I started on January 12th. So those of you who haven't met me, I apologize. I'm trying to juggle a new job and do this at the same time. Throughout my career and throughout my life, I've been a committed volunteer. I told the RCAC that I've been a volunteer since I was in grade school, and it was noted that that was a little bit geeky. I have literally done this every year. I've served on numbers of boards and organizations. I've selected leadership. I've made difficult financial decisions, and I've driven change. I know the difference between governance and management, and I know how to challenge and support organizations through governance. My interest in higher education, which led me to seek this role, stems from my own college experience, where I had a close relationship with the president. She was an amazing leader, running an interesting place, and it captivated me. My early career cemented my intrigue with education, and I've maintained this interest throughout my adult life. I've been more than a casual observer of the industry of higher education since then. The role on the Board of Regents would tap this intrinsic interest. This is how the experience and interest would contribute, how my experience and interest would contribute to the University Board of Regents. I have 5 key points. First, I have significant experience in large organizations. I know my experiences leading complex organizations would help me function as a successful board member, asking the right sets of questions and challenging critical assumptions. Second, I've got communications, public affairs, and strategic planning savvy. I know how to tell a compelling story, and I know how to shape an organization so that its compelling story can be told. Third, I'm a committed volunteer and have strong governance credentials. Fourth, I have a strong and proven ability to manage the intricacies of an organization, its relationships with other organizations. I'm a practiced fiscal manager, problem solver, and strategic thinking. And fifth, as I also told the RCAC, I really love the product of the University of Minnesota. I love being on any college campus and find the sense of opportunity intoxicating. The futures of individuals, the future of knowledge, and the future of society all in one place. The university has this wonderful cadence of new beginnings. Each year brings a new sense of hope with its empty grade book, its still perfect attendance records, and an even one-loss record. There are few, if any, entities in the state with a more consequential role in securing a successful future for Minnesota than the U. Its 3-part mission of education, research, and outreach will help us educate tomorrow's leaders, solve some of the biggest challenges facing our planet, and address the unique needs of Minnesota. I have an extensive public and private sector background in both governance and senior leadership, and I want to contribute to the university's governing board. I'd love to put this experience to use against such a great product. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Darren Rocha. Welcome. Have a seat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And proceed. Yeah.
My name is Darren Rocha. I am married to Valerie Chadwick Rocha, and we have 3 young children in Independence, Minnesota. I'm pleased to be here today as the 3rd Congressional District endorsed candidate for this position. And I am also the general manager of a medical clinic in Eagan, and I have my law firm with my wife as a law partner in Long Lake. When I got back from Iraq in 2010 and started to reestablish our lives back in Independence, I noticed that the 3rd District Regent, David Larson, was living just down County Road 6 from me. And throughout my life, since being a regent, which ended in 1995, the regent part, I'm still here, I maintained relationships with multiple regents. And so I gave him a call and asked if he'd be interested in having lunch one day, and he said, sure. So we sat down at Sunsets in Wayzata, which was his favorite lunch spot, and we began a mentorship friendship that lasted until he passed. And what I enjoyed was not just the camaraderie of somebody with David Larson's experience as executive vice president of Cargill, starting from a very small position within the company, but also the fact that we had a shared love for the university, and we talked about things that had happened over the past 25 years since I was first elected to the board. We also talked about the possibility that at some point in my life I would return to the board with some life experience And in order to take the context of knowing what we were trying to do back from 1989 to 1995 when I served on the board, having that azimuth of what the university was seeking to do. And it's quite remarkable to be able to look at it from that perspective. When I listen to the candidates for the 1st district and when I listen to my fellow candidates for the 3rd, I'm stricken by the fact that they're talking about the same concepts that we were talking about back then. And to some extent, it almost feels painful for me in a way to say, well, right, we talked about this, this is what they told us, and yet we're still fighting that same challenge now. But nonetheless, when David passed away, a couple local legislators asked me if I was interested in serving out the final 2 years, because in 2 years there's only 16 meetings of the board. And the university is extremely complex, and the governance process is extremely complex. And so I would be in a position to do that and be effective right away. And I was kind of concerned because it made so much sense that sometimes those things don't come to fruition. In any case, that is why I elected to run for this position. I understand that there's a rumor out there that I may have been a perennial candidate for the Board of Regents, and that is simply not true. Since 1989, I have not even considered running for the board again until today. Since I was a regent, I've clerked for a federal appellate court judge. I've worked in the private sector and the public sector. I've been an employer and an employee. And I've also served my country. That all has given me an amazing perspective on what we did as a board. I look more at the board and say, I don't regret the things that we worked hard to do. It's some of the things that we wanted to do that we didn't do. Some of the things that we did is we worked very hard to improve student services. And being in my position, in the at-large position reserved for a student, I had a great perspective on that. I still consider myself to be a strong student advocate. The graduation rate was terrible. It was 17% in 4 years. It is now dramatically better. I'm very pleased that the university has had so much success, and we started that at that time. But one of the challenges that we faced was that we were moving to a high tuition, high financial aid model. And the fact is, that's allowed the administrative costs to work as far out of line as they have been. And the question earlier about the employees of the university as a whole, you have to look at those downstream effects when you have such a high salary structure in the administration. I know they're taking this issue on, and I think that's important. Anyway, with my personal experience with about every aspect of the university would serve me well on the board. I'd be very proud to go back. And one of the things in my service, I don't have a problem working within the system, but I'm also willing to ask the tough questions to make the university serve the state better. I would really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the other three, you can stay where you are. The other three candidates should step down to the table. We will have 25 minutes of questioning now. And we are ready for the first question, I guess. Do I see a hand? Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask our candidates about their, how they would go about engaging the faculty and the students in decision-making. How would the processes be in, or what expectation would you have for the administration, more, I should probably say it that way, to make sure that the voices of the front lines, whether they're, like was mentioned earlier, the groundskeepers and cafeteria workers and all those kinds of things, or the faculty or the students, how would you, what's your philosophy in making sure they're involved in decision makings and making sure that the decision making is transparent and inclusive?
Bill Luther, do you want to begin?
Sure. It's Mr. Chair, Representative Bernardi. I would say transparency would be the key thing to look at here in terms of the operations of the university. Obviously, not being on the Board of Regents at this time, I don't know exactly what processes they have set up for the transparency when it comes to those kinds of decisions. But my feeling has always been, from my work here in the legislature and my work in business and my work in Washington, that the more transparency that you can have in a process, It creates a more inclusive process and creates opportunities for people to provide input along the way. It creates a lot less resentment over time and a lot more satisfaction with the overall process. So I would examine very carefully what processes we have for transparency in that process so that we can have, we can include people as much as possible and get as much good input along the way.
Dr. Belzer?
Mr. Chair, Representative Bernardi, in a world of customer service, and certainly the university competes with other schools, it's very, very important to have a happy workforce and to have happy individuals who are teaching our students. So we've certainly dealt a lot with that in our business in healthcare. We do a lot of work not only with our unionized employees, but our non-unionized employees, in making sure that they're part of the decision-making, sitting at the table whenever we go through new care model changes or process changes. We happen to use performance improvement methodology in healthcare. I'm sure other organizations do, called Lean. The idea of Lean is to value the employees and eliminate waste, and we found that to be very, very helpful. So yes, it would be an important differentiator.
Mr. Rocha?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Bernardi. The university has, having been in the student regent position, I don't know that I can ever take off that student advocacy mantle. And as the 3rd District Regent, I would be omnipresent with the students, because it's one of the things that I enjoy the most about the university is the next generation of students that are coming along. There are the student representatives to the board, which I served in before I was elected by the legislature to the Board of Regents, and they would obviously be a critical part of that. But I think you also have to get out the student leaders also, need to be providing input. And I also think that in this age of technology, and I think there's more of this going on, actually trying to find what the average student feels about various conditions at the university and how they feel about their experience. With the staff, it's a little bit more challenging. There are ways for the staff to provide input to the university's processes that the board does get feedback from them, and I think that you need to continue to utilize those things as well. But there's a lot of pressure when you're on the board to go with the information that's provided by the administration. And I always felt as a member of the board that I was better serving the university and the employees if I was taking the time to listen to other voices outside of what the official statement was being provided by the administrative leadership. And that would help color what we would do to make sure that we weren't being fed something that was different than how they were actually feeling. And I would continue to ask those hard questions.
Paula Braun?
Mr. Chair, members, thank you for the question. You know, I spent well over a decade in retail where we spent all of our time trying to figure out what the front line was saying, because they had the pulse on the consumer that you couldn't get any other way. And I would bring a number of those techniques to bear, both with the staff as well as with the student body, involving people in all sorts of the issues of the university, or in the case of a company in Best Buy, we had a program where we cut $42 million out of our administrative costs through everybody going out and finding the places they could find it. We challenged everybody to find their costs, and there are all sorts of ways to involve people in those kinds of experiences, and I think we ought to be doing that. There are ways to do it informally. There are ways to create mechanisms to make that happen. I'd want to bring all of that experience to bear. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Norton?
Thank you all for your willingness to take on this important role. The University of Minnesota has a small branch down in Rochester, Minnesota. It is a niche university, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about whether you know about the University of Minnesota Rochester and how you might be able to continue to support that niche experience that is unique and perhaps more cost-effective than some of the other branches, but it is small and growing. So just looking for your thoughts about that.
Dr. Belzer, do you want to go first?
Mr. Chair, Madam Representative, thank you very much. I did search around and take a look at the University of Minnesota Rochester. I was a little confused on the website trying to figure out exactly how many employees they had. The university website said 750 and another citation had 450, but I know that there are, the focus of the university is on health sciences. There's 2 undergraduate bachelor degrees, one training ultrasonographers and cardiac and radiologists, and the other is in health sciences, sort of a undergraduate degree with diversity. And then there's the graduate school with bioinformatics or some a program like that that is very, very interesting and very, very appealing. So I think the fact that you're situated in Rochester, close to the Mayo Clinic, focus on healthcare professions that are sorely needed, I would certainly be in favor of expanding and making sure that that campus prospers.
Darren Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Norton, I have a close relationship with the campus because I was on the board when we lost the Waseca campus in the 1st District. I grew up in the 1st District. I'm from Seal County, Owatonna. And I was a strong advocate that the university having a presence in Rochester made tremendous sense. And what I'm proud of is it started as a collaboration between systems and is now becoming a more focused university asset. But it's not just a university asset for the sake of being there. They're taking advantage of the competitive advantage of, as Dr. Belzer stated, being next to Mayo and all of the medical assets that are available in Rochester. I think it's unique. I think it is precisely the kind of thing that your land-grant university ought to be focusing on, to be particularized and not simply duplicating what's being done without, around the state and other places. And I'm proud of what we did then. I'm proud of where it is now, and I would be very supportive of continuing that process of firming up what that means within the university system.
Paul.
Mr. Chair, Representative, thank you. I toured the campus briefly in late December, and it was a brief tour, so I don't pretend to know all about it, but it was compelling for a couple reasons. One, for all the programs that were already mentioned, and I won't list them all, but the high degree of relationship with Mayo Clinic seemed to make a lot of sense to me. And the physical presence of the campus in downtown Rochester, with the sort of ability to have an urban experience in a very easy space with that high partnership, seemed to be like where we should keep the focus of that university. I know both from working in a number of organizations and building out functions across the world for companies that mission creep and scope creep sort of comes into these places, and I'm sure that that's happening in Rochester to some degree right now in terms of wanting to expand the program as well as expand student services and expand all the kinds of things that might go with that. I'd probably err on the side of trying to keep it connected to Mayo and keep it connected to that urban campus, because I think it has a special appeal and an ability to serve students better for those disciplines. Thanks.
Mr. Luther.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Norton, that presents a great opportunity. I remember when it was debated and the excitement over having established that because of the collaboration with Mayo. But now I think it provides some terrific opportunities for the needs, the healthcare needs of Greater Minnesota. There's a great need in Greater Minnesota for healthcare practitioners, as you're well aware. And what a wonderful opportunity with technology, the way we have it today, to expand that facility and to meet that need around the state. And I'm sure you'll be advocating for that. So thanks for the question, and I just think it presents a great opportunity.
Senator Sharon, I think you have a question.
Yes, I'm trying to figure out how to ask the question, though, but I guess I might say that if you're selected to be a regent and you see yourself executing that role, can you describe to me how you would engage in the board and during the meetings with the regents to influence what the agenda is that you're going to be engaged in discussing rather than having it be fed to you, in a sense? And what role do you see yourself playing in really establishing what the outcome criteria are by which you will know that the university is achieving the objectives that have been set by your policies?
Darren Rocha, you can go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Sharon, that's what we did. When we came in '89, it was a big deal. It was the first year of the RCAC, and we were sent with the intent to change the way the board had been exercising oversight, because and most of you in this room are too young to remember, but the university had a tough time in the '80s. Education quality was low, graduation rate was low, student satisfaction was weak, and there were problems abounding. And the legislature had a major distrust issue with the university over some funding issues when they found that there were some pools of funding that were being held by different departments. when we were elected to the board, there was a strong process of indoctrination as a regent to say, your role is to hire and fire the president. Nothing more, nothing less. If you feel the president's not doing a good job, you replace the president. Otherwise, the administration will run the institution. We got a clear message from the legislature that we needed to be transformational. We needed to look at what the university was doing, working with the administration. I was very young when I was elected, and I learned very quickly that there was a process where I could communicate with the administration. I could ask hard questions. I could ask a lot of questions outside of the board meeting so as not to put the university administration in a tough spot, but there were times that I did. There were times that I don't have time in this answer to go into the specific instances, but you had to have the guts and the backbone to say, you know, we're talking about this. This is not the information I'm getting from outside communities as to where the university needs to be going, and this is in terms of its expenditures and tuition rates and so on. And I came back to the legislature every year and found that there was a bit of a disconnect between what I was told the legislature was saying and what legislators were actually telling me. So if I am selected, I'll be back here the next 2 sessions to find out what the university is how the university is doing for your district.
Paula Prohl.
Mr. Chair, Senator, thank you. I'm glad you asked the question that way, because it's important to know how to manage the agenda as much as it is how to manage what's on the agenda and within that agenda. And I've spent a lot of time in a lot of different organizations and probably know as many different ways to do that as one might not want to know. But I think that there are, you know, for me, the most important things a region ought to be doing is there's sort of perennial work that we would do, we ought to be doing all day, every day, and that is working on the overall cost structure of the university, keeping our eye on all the administrative costs and doing that on a daily, regular basis, working on access issues for the university, and working on affordability issues for the university. All of those 3 have to keep going, and I would make sure that they were on the agenda every single meeting and that we were looking at those. Then I think we look at the sort of initiatives that we're trying to drive at this point in time for the university. The Academic Health Center and the work that's being done there is obviously one of those. I think there are probably some other ones we'd want to look at. I am a big believer that the university needs to focus more, and we need to maybe limit some of what we're doing and look at the university in context of the overall higher ed system of the state, so that we can eliminate some of the duplication that exists and focus the resources of the university towards the things that the university can do best. Those are the kinds of things that I would want to see on the agenda on a regular basis. Thank you.
Mr. Luther?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Senator Sharon, we'd have to keep our eye on the ball, quite frankly. We've got record tuition, we've got record student debt, we've got record administrative costs. And these are the issues that we would have to keep in mind regardless of what agenda is presented. And I would say we would handle it the same way that you do here in your role. You keep your eye on the ball. That's the way I attempted to serve when I served here, same in Congress. And you set the agenda. You develop your leadership style. You develop trust with others. You develop consensus. That's how you get things done in a body like this. And I think that's exactly the kind of approach in a very constructive way that needs to be done on a board like the Board of Regents. And in terms of measurement, I think I would measure my performance. I'd measure it based on did I move the ball forward in my service as a regent? Was I willing to take on the tough issues, or did I do the go along to get along approach, which is so common today on board after board, whether it's private or public sector. That's how I would measure my performance. And I think if you look at my performance here in this body and Congress, my experience as a whole, I think you'll see that I'm the kind of person who is willing to take on the tough issues, take them on ahead of the time that they're popular, and to move the ball forward, which would be my goal.
Dr. Belzer.
So, Mr. Chair, Senator Sharon, let me give you a technical answer and then an adaptive answer. The technical answer is certainly there are mechanisms where leadership gets together with board leadership to determine what the agenda is and try to prioritize that. Every organization does that. I'm not sure how the university regents do it. I've watched several meetings on YouTube. It seems to me the meetings are more transactional and relational, so I have to believe that a lot of the work is done in committees, and it appears to be very, very good work. So I wouldn't be able to tell that from watching what happens or looking at the agendas. But in terms of the the adaptive leadership aspect of it. I would think that the goal would be to have the Board of Regents be proactive and anticipatory and looking forward rather than reactive and being not necessarily a rubber stamp, but forwarding the status quo. I think the other aspect is that, and I see the Regents beginning to do this, at least with the Legislature and metrics, and benchmarks and data would be, and outcomes would be the goal of what your work should be, rather than nuance or hunch or intuition. And then finally, it would be up to the board chair, and I have no reason to believe this isn't the case, that the administrative and leadership courage need to be a big part of the agenda setting of the board, where we challenge each other, or the Regents challenge each other very, very vigorously along with the president over issues that that seem to be controversial, and to set a very high bar for meaningful discussion.
Representative Gruenhagen, you still have a question?
Yep. Oh, thank you, Mr.
Go
Chair.
ahead.
Thank you, candidates. You're all very well qualified. My question has to do with the medical school and healthcare. You know, I sat in Ways and Means, and they said that the projected increase in medical assistance costs for this biennium is $1.4 billion. For next biennium, it's $1.3 billion. This biennium, it's growing at almost 17%, and I'm sure it's going to be close to that in the next biennium. You know, according to former state demographer Tom Gillespie, if we don't get healthcare costs under control, there's going to be no additional money for K-12, roads or bridges, or higher ed. Okay, so I think we're in for a wake-up call here. I consider Romney Care, Obamacare, MNsure Care, or Goober Care, whatever you want to call it, to be a disaster and actually driving costs higher. All right. Do you believe that the medical school at the university can not only continue to be an excellent medical school, graduating our doctors and professionals, but could it be an institution also that produced private sector innovation and reforms that would actually reduce medical costs and increase access for our state? And I'll give you one example. When we look at the oil and gas industry, did government produce lower cost in our oil and gas prices? Or was it the private sector through innovation and competition that actually produced lower gasoline costs and energy costs in our country? So, you know, Dr. Belzer, if I could get you just to believe what I believe about health care. But if you'd like to respond to that, thank you.
This is for all four, I presume?
Yes.
Ms. Prowl, do you want to go first?
I'd be happy to go first, Mr. Chair. Representative, thank you. I think it's the medical school. The medical school can do what you've suggested. I think the university can do what you've suggested. I think some of the ways we're going to help drive down medical costs and care costs over time will be through innovations that aren't necessarily only medical. I mean, there are huge communication opportunities we have. Telemedicine is barely taken hold in this state, and I think there's some ways the university could drive that and make that much more successful, perhaps partnering with the private sector to help do that at a cost-effective rate. So yes, I think that's possible.
We have about 5 minutes, approximately 5 minutes left, so the shorter the answer is the better. But Mr. Luther, you're up next.
Very short, Mr. Chairman, Representative Gruenhagen. The medical school has a great opportunity in that it's part of the University of Minnesota with so many other research facilities in the university. We're not like Mayo or other hospitals like that you hear of in the country. The University of Minnesota Medical School can draw on the research done by so many other departments. That gives them a unique opportunity to do some of the things along the lines of what you're talking about. So, yes, I think there are real opportunities here.
Dr. Belzer?
Mr. Chair, Senator Gruenhagen, know we had a discussion in your office about the Affordable Care Act, and let's just say we agreed to disagree to some extent. Certainly, it's not a perfect act, but if you sit where you sit determines where you stand, and if you're working at a hospital like mine, having more people insured is a lot better than having people uninsured just because of the health consequences of uninsurance. It would be fatal. But yes, in terms of your direct question, there's no doubt that the health policy aspect of the University of Minnesota's research contingent, which is quite robust, certainly can move in the direction of trying to figure out how to make the cost curve bend and affordable health care be actually affordable.
Mr. Rocha?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Gruenhagen. I deal with this issue, the cost issue, virtually every day as the general manager of a medical clinic. Patients that have discovered that they have a deductible that exploded on them, or they no longer can go see the doctor that they want anymore because now the payers are going to these narrow networks and so on. So I see this every single day. To answer your question, I don't think that there's a choice. I think the university has to be at the forefront. And it already is working with private sector companies in healthcare in many different ways. We have deans that come from other institutions, and we have relationships with other private facilities. Yeah. But I won't go through what's already been said. This is already going on. They're already working with other parts of the university to try to come up with ways of delivering healthcare in a more cost-effective way and letting people find less expensive means. I mean, the one upside of a larger deductible is people are really paying very close attention to their use of care now. And if the university can be part of helping them get access to more care while they're being careful, I think we're all going to be better off for it. So I think the university has to play an important role.
We have time for about one more question before this time is up. Senator Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is in line with Representative Gruenheim's healthcare question. You've recently heard the governor's announce some investments, additional investments in the University of Minnesota Medical School. But my question is related to that, in light of that, and what is the biggest challenge or biggest issue that you see the University of Minnesota facing, and what would you do about it? How would you tackle it?
Mr. Luther, you want to start?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator Franzen. Number one issue is tuition control. It's now doing everything we can to continue the freeze that was so responsibly put in place finally last session. If you read what's going on in the country in terms of tuition and debt, you just come to realize that somebody has to take the leadership in this country in getting this under control. It's not only needed for everyone, it's particularly important for minorities and people who are trying to get access to the system, people, economically disadvantaged people. We need tuition control. And and you can't always count on subsidies or state funding for that. We're going to have to figure out other savings in the system, figuring out how to increase revenues, cut costs in order to keep tuition under control. That's going to be the number one way that we can provide affordability and access to the people of this state. Thank you.
Dr. Belzer.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Senator Franson, the university underwent a robust external review at the time President Taylor was in place before hiring the dean of the medical school. And they also underwent a recent strategic plan looking at their shortcomings and their areas of strength. And then there was also the Blue Ribbon Panel. So three groups have done major work. And rather than sort of pick apart what they've done, let me just say there are three things that I would be concerned with as a regent. Number one would be, since the effort and emphasis is on research, and we have a research-focused dean, and that was the marching orders. I think somebody has to look out after basic classroom education and basic education so we turn out good clinicians, not just good researchers. I'm confident we can do that. Second problem would be to make sure that we get the right distribution of our healthcare workers to rural Minnesota and where they're needed. With a new care model using advanced practice providers, not only physicians, we need to figure out a way that we can get more providers of different training to the rural areas. And then finally, the culture is one that needs to be addressed. I think with the stepping down of the CEO at Fairview, the university hospital is an ideal time to look at this goofy interaction that, I'll take that off the record, the interaction that they have as a virtual organization between university practice plan, the medical school, and Fairview all needs to be reevaluated, because I think virtual integrations are not as meaningful as real integrations, and I think that's an opportunity for them.
Mr. Rocha?
Mr. Chair, Senator Franzen, can I ask for a clarification of the question? Was it the university as a whole, or was it related to the medical?
Mr. Chair and Mr. Rocha, it would be the University of Minnesota Medical School, so specifically to the medical school.
All right, thank you. We ran into this challenge when I was on the board where at that point in time, the facilities around the state were buying up, the systems were buying up clinics. And so the university, which in the past had always been recognized as this great resource of the kind of high-end research and care, people were referred to the university because there were many more independent facilities around the state. But as these systems started buying up the clinics, they were putting all the referrals to their systems, and the university's referral base was drying up, so the university was moving forward. This led to the Fairview relationship, which then brings us up to where Dr. Belzer was just describing some of the challenges that we're facing right now. The big challenge that we're going to have is funding, is when we're carrying this research and teaching responsibility that has a more general statewide requirement, it makes it very difficult to be cost competitive and to not run into the kind of financial challenges, which is why we're having to make these additional investments. As a teaching clinic, we have residents through our clinic continuously. And I get a chance to speak with these young doctors, and they talk about the challenges that they're facing, and they're kind of concerned about where they're going to be able to take their careers. But fundamentally, we have to do many of the things that Dr. Belzer was talking about in terms of finding a way of having these relationships to keep the resources available so that we do a good job of educating the next generation of medical providers.
Ms. Prowl?
Mr. Chair, Senator, thank you. For the medical school, the one thing that I would focus on is focus. I think that we've got these challenges that all of my compatriots up here have already talked through, but I think we've got to focus on where we do our best work. The university, this state has probably one of the lowest costs of health care and some of the highest quality care of any place in the world, partly due to the University of Minnesota and the clinicians and practitioners it's trained over the years. And we need to find a way to partner with those people around the state who are doing such great work in so many different places instead of competing with them. And so I would spend our time figuring out how we're going to focus our work on partnering rather than competing.
And this concludes our question and answer session. I understood that the congressional district, District 3, did have a caucus. Is there anyone that wants to report on the recommendation from that caucus? Or we have a letter also, I guess I can read if it's okay. All right. This is from the chair of that caucus was Senator Limmer, and they convened on February the 6th here in the state office building, and all 4 candidates were considered, and each one had a chance to speak for 3 to 4 minutes. The selection by the 3rd Congressional District, their recommendation is Darren Rocha. With that, I'm going to turn the gavel back to the senator.
Well, members, we're back to voting again. There's a question. Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if House and/or Senate Counsel could give us a little bit further explanation of the rules or the law on whether or not we do actually have to recommend a candidate, or if we could proceed with no recommendation.
Senate Counsel.
Madam Chair, Senator Miller, members, that's a complex answer to your question, because Article 4 of the Constitution, Section 7, says that, I think it's Section 7, that the legislature sets the rules for its procedures. And what we had rules, we had joint rules, and you see them here. And then intervening sometime after those rules, there was a statute passed. There's some inconsistency between the statute and the rule. And it's my opinion that to the extent there is an inconsistency, that the rule should govern, because the body sets its own rules. A law signed by a governor 2 years ago, another legislature can't bind the legislature. However, as a practical matter, when legislature tries to comply with the laws, we're running into some difficulty now. The rule is the one that says you have to recommend a candidate. That's your charge. And there's the rule before you, and there's also a rule on the convention, which refers to the names of the members referred for each candidate for each seat, which implies you can have more than one. And nowhere in the rule is there any mention of only one. It's in the statute. So there's a conflict. And so that's my answer to your question, is that we have to decide what governs this proceeding. I think as a practical matter, your role is to winnow the candidates and make a recommendation. And so we've winnowed in the first district, but we haven't winnowed to one. And the question is, do we have to do that? And I think the answer is maybe not. I mean, that would be the goal. Let me rephrase it. I think the answer is no, based on the principle that the rule should govern. The rule doesn't specify only have to have one candidate, and the rule on joint convention says that the joint convention should consider the name or names of the candidates for each seat. And so the rules seem to contemplate, or do contemplate, more than one name. But the rules also say you have to name somebody. That's your charge. I mean, what's the consequence of not naming somebody? I don't know, but that's your charge, you know.
Madam Chair and Mr. Fuller.
Senator
You are
Miller.
correct, that was very complex. Thank you.
So,
I still don't know the answer.
so Senator Miller, the law says we have to and the rule doesn't say.
No, Madam Chair, the rule says we do.
The rule says
The
we
rule
have
says
to,
we.
and the law
must
says
name
we
them.
don't.
The law doesn't say anything.
The law says we may.
I mean, it has a, Madam Chair, Senator Miller, the law sets a process for doing it, and I think it contemplates that you're going to do it, but doesn't say you have to do it. The rule says you have to make a recommendation, and that rule's in front of you. It's 4.01, I believe. So, I mean, it's not, this happens in other contexts, and the simple answer, of course, is to, well, not the simple, it would be to amend the law and the rules so they're consistent, so we don't have this problem. But it is the province of the legislature to set its own rules of procedures, and they have, and they're in conflict with the statute.
Mr. Fuller, the rules that we have before us, the statute to consider for regent selection proceedings, if you turn it over, it does say there, the joint committee may recommend no more than one candidate for each vacancy. So isn't that in fact the law that does state it?
Madam Chair, the law does state that, but we have joint rules, and the joint rule on this committee is silent on whether or not you can only name one. And the joint rule in the joint convention says that the joint convention should consider the name or names of the candidates for each seat. So the joint rules, I think, could fairly be said to contemplate that you're not limited to one candidate.
Let's proceed.
Senator Ortman, did you have a follow-up?
That was my question, thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, so we will begin the voting on the third district, and as we did before, we will take the roll, and then because we have more than two, we'll eliminate the lowest, and then we'll do it again if we don't have the majority, and we'll proceed. So we will stick with what we did before and start with the House. So clerk, you may take the roll.
Nornis.
Prowl.
Barrett.
Prowl.
Bernardi.
Luther.
Prowl.
Christensen. Daniels. Gruenhagen.
Prowl.
Heinzman.
Prowl.
Lean.
Luther.
McDonald.
Prowl.
Norton.
Prowl.
O'Neill.
Belzer.
Pulowski.
Luther.
Pugh.
Rocha.
Rosenthal.
Belzer.
Whalen.
Rocha.
Winkler.
Belzer.
Bonoff.
Belzer.
Clausen.
Belzer.
Eakin.
Luther.
Franzen.
Belzer.
Kent.
Belzer.
Miller.
Prawl.
Nelson.
Prawl.
Ortman.
Rocha.
Peterson.
Rocha.
Pratt.
Pass.
Sharon.
Belzer.
Sparks.
Luther.
Pratt.
Rocha.
Madam Chair, in the House, Belzer received 4 votes. Prawl received 7 votes. Rocha received 2 votes. Luther received 3 votes. In the Senate, Belzer received 5 votes. Prawl received 2 votes. Rocha received 3 votes. Luther received 2.
Rocha. Yeah, I know. And then
There's
for us, all that went. So they both got 5. Take up both of them, right? They tied.
No, Rocha.
Oh, so who got 5? Luther and in the. No, you got. Oh, I see. But they have to get a majority vote in each separately, right?
Because it's 5 to 3rd.
So did Belzer,
So members, I would ask the clerk to read the total votes across all 4 and then say.
So Belzer, between the House and the Senate, received 9 votes. Prawl, between the House and the Senate, received 9 votes. Rocha, between the House and the Senate, received 5 votes. Luther, between the House and the Senate, received 5 votes.
So members, having said that, Rocha and Luther are now eliminated, and the next round will be between Belzer and Prawl.
Madam Chair?
Senator Ortman.
Just a question, what is the basis for that? I understood that we were going to drop the lowest candidate, but there really isn't a lowest candidate. So now you're saying you're going to drop 2 candidates?
Senator Ortman, after conferring with Chair Nornes and council, it said the lowest vote would be eliminated, and given they were tied, they were the lowest, so we eliminated them. That was the rule. It doesn't say to eliminate only one, it said the lowest votes. They were both the lowest. House and Senate council conferred. So, we will vote again.
Nornes.
Prowl.
Barrett.
Prowl.
Bernardi.
Pass.
Christensen.
Prowl.
Daniels. Gruenhagen.
Prowl.
Heinzman.
Prowl.
Lean.
Belzer.
McDonald.
Prowl.
Norton.
Prawl.
O'Neill.
Belzer.
Pulowski.
Belzer.
Pugh.
Prawl.
Rosenthal.
Belzer.
Whalen.
Prawl.
Winkler.
Belzer.
Bernardi.
Belzer.
Bonoff.
Belzer.
Clausen.
Belzer.
Eakin.
Belzer.
Franzen.
Belzer.
Kent.
Belzer.
Miller.
Prawl.
Nelson. Belzer.
Ortman.
Prawl.
Peterson.
Belzer.
Pratt,
Prohl.
Sharon,
Belzer.
Sparks,
Belzer.
Madam Chair, in the House, Belzer received 7 votes, Prohl received 9 votes. In the Senate, Belzer received 9 votes, Prohl received 3 votes.
So, members, because that was not as extreme lack as the last time, we are going to just do the vote one more time and see if anyone chooses to change their votes, and then we'll go from there. So, clerk, if you could take the roll.
Nornis,
Prohl.
Barrett,
Prohl.
Bernardi, Christensen,
Prohl.
Daniels,
Belzer.
Gruenhagen,
Prohl.
Heinzman,
Prohl.
Lean,
Belzer.
McDonald,
Prohl.
Norton,
Prohl.
O'Neill,
Prohl.
Pulowski,
Belzer.
Pugh,
Prohl.
Rosenthal,
Belzer.
Whalen,
Prohl.
Winkler,
Belzer.
Bonoff,
Belzer.
Clausen,
Belzer.
Eakin,
Belzer.
Franzen,
Belzer.
Kent,
Belzer.
Miller,
Prohl.
Belzer.
Nelson, Ortman,
Prohl.
Peterson,
Belzer.
Pratt,
Prohl.
Sharon,
Belzer.
Sparks,
Belzer.
Madam Chair, in the House, Belzer received 6 votes, Prohl received 10 votes. In the Senate, Belzer received 9 votes, Prohl received 3 votes.
Senator Peterson.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make 2 motions. The first motion, I move the Joint Committee make 2 recommendations in the 3rd Congressional District. I'll wait for the second motion that we decide on that.
So, members, there's a motion on the floor to move 2, to recommend 2 to the joint convention. So this would be using the council's interpretation, not following the law, but assuming that the joint rules, which are of higher order, allow for that. So is there any discussion?
I'll second.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Chair, I just would like to have Mr. Gehring weigh in on this question of precedence between law and rule and what our charge is today, if you don't mind.
Please do. Mr. Gehring.
Madam Chair, so I think just to clarify for the committee, it's not that the committee is not following the law, but it's making a procedural motion, which isn't within the authority of the legislature to do, to forward 2 nominees to the floor, and I think that's appropriate as a matter of procedure for the legislature.
Mr. Gehring, could you repeat that, please, because that left me confused.
So Madam Chair, the motion to move 2 members to the floor is a procedural motion, and so I think just clarifying that is, that's the intent of the motion, is to choose a procedure for this committee to forward nominees, and you're choosing 2, and I'm just putting in the record that's a procedural motion.
So it is in order?
Correct.
Gotcha. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the rule and looking at the law that states no more than one, that the committee may recommend no more than 1 candidate, it seems to me the more appropriate motion, Senator Peterson, would be a no recommendation.
Madam Chair,
Senator Peterson.
maybe Senate Council can weigh in on this. I conferred with Senate Council on the motion ahead of time, and that was the instructions that I got was the appropriate motion to make. So, in fact, the first motion that I brought up was a no recommendation. He counseled two recommendations. And so that's why I made the motion, Senator.
Mr. Fuller, did you want to comment on that?
Well, Madam Chair, as Senator Pratt, the rule, just in front of you, election of regents says the joint committee must make recommendations for vacancies on the board of regents. So I don't think either the statute or the rule contemplates no recommendation. And I agree with Mr. Guerin. I mean, this rule is of a higher priority. So I don't think we can ignore the rule because it was made by our bodies. As a committee, we can't dispense with a joint rule.
So it seems that the motion is in order, and the motion stands. We're now in discussion. Representative Norton.
Given this discussion, and for the record, my preference would be that we could come to a conclusion. I just don't think we can, for one, that we amend the recommendation to include District 1.
That was Madam Chair, that was going to be my second motion. I just wanted to do one at a time. But if the committee can do both, I'd leave that to staff to decide if they can. I'm fine with that.
Mr. Fuller.
Well, Madam Chair, just to complete the puzzle, so if we do adopt these motions, each candidate who's recommended would have to get a majority vote for each body. And so we would have two ballots, and we'd have a ballot for the one, and the ballot, I don't think, because you can only vote for one candidate. So there's no way to forward two under that mathematical situation. So you'd have, okay, District 3 would have 2 votes. District 1 would have, is it 1? Would have 2 votes. Because they do each need a majority from each body, which I assume is the understanding.
So, yeah, seems as though members would be better to take these motions one at a time. So any more discussion on the Peterson motion?
Madam Chair, can he repeat the motion so we all?
Senator Peterson, please repeat the motion.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I move the joint committee make 2 recommendations in the 3rd Congressional District.
Okay.
And so, Council, is it your recommendation that we would have to take a roll call on this motion, or couldn't we just vote as a show of, support?
Vote, I would imagine.
No.
Madam
roll
Chair,
call.
you do not need a roll call.
Very good, okay. More questions? Representative Bernardi, did you have a question?
No, Madam Chair, I don't have a question. Is that a comment? Is that
Comment,
okay.
please.
Thank you. It seems that we haven't even given a chance to figure out if we can come up with a conclusion, so I just want to comment that I think it's a little premature, is just my point.
More discussion. Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Representative Bernardi. I think we could take a few more votes. There was a little bit of movement in this last vote, so I think we could take a couple of more votes to see if we could come to some sort of a conclusion. I'm not opposed to the motion in principle eventually, but I think we could try a couple more votes.
Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I speak in favor of the motion before us. It does appear that there's very little movement, and I think to make a recommendation for both candidates in the 3rd district would serve both the candidates well, the regent selection well, and I think it'd serve the state of Minnesota better if we could proceed with the 2 names in nomination and decide on the floor of our joint hearing.
More discussion on the motion.
Madam Chair?
Representative Winkler.
I would also support the Peterson motion, and I think that Senator Nelson is correct that even if we were to come to one joint single recommendation today as a practical matter, that would have little impact on the floor of the House and Senate in a joint convention. I think as a practical matter, any of these candidates are going to be in front of us anyway. So to spend all night for this group to come up with one recommendation seems to be a futile exercise.
Okay. Any other discussion at this time? All right. Renewing the Peterson motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is adopted.
He moved.
Our joint committee recommends that both Paula Prahl and Michael Belzer be forwarded to the joint convention. Now, I'm going to put them both, we are going to do a roll call vote. This would be a slate. The slate of Michael Belzer and Paula Prahl are now before you in a roll call vote.
Madam Chair, would you like to start with the Senate or the House?
House.
Nornis.
Slate.
Barrett. Slate. Bernardi.
Slate.
Christensen.
Slate.
Daniels.
Slate.
Gruenhagen. Heinzman.
Slate.
Lean.
Slate.
McDonald.
Slate.
Norton.
Slate.
We did a
O'Neill.
Slate.
Pulowski. Pugh.
Slate.
Rosenthal.
Slate.
Whalen.
Slate.
Winkler.
Slate.
Pulowski. Bonoff.
Slate.
Clausen.
Slate.
Eakin.
Slate.
Fishbach. Oh, excuse me. I apologize. Franzen. Kent.
Slate.
Miller.
Slate.
Nelson.
Slate.
Ortman.
Slate.
Peterson.
Slate.
Pratt.
Slate.
Sharon.
Slate.
Sparks.
Slate.
Madam Chair, in the House, the slate received 15 votes in favor. In the Senate, the slate received 12 votes in favor.
Clerk, were there any dissenting votes?
There were no dissenting votes.
Thank you very much. Representative Pulowski. Oh, roll is closed, I apologize. Okay, roll is closed, and the slate did prevail. Next motion, Senator Peterson.
Madam Chair, I move the joint committee make 2 recommendations in the 1st Congressional District.
Are there any questions or comments on the Peterson motion? Mr. Gehring.
Madam Chair, maybe just to clarify for members that the option for voting would be to vote for slate, or you could also vote for one or the other individually, so you wouldn't necessarily have to vote for both.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, clerk, please take the roll.
Nornis.
Slate.
Barrett.
Slate.
Bernardi.
Slate.
Christensen.
Slate.
Daniels.
Slate.
Gruenhagen.
Slate.
Heinzman.
Slate.
Lean.
Slate.
McDonald.
Slate.
Norton.
Slate.
O'Neill.
Slate.
Pulowski.
Slate.
Pugh.
Slate.
Rosenthal.
Slate.
Whalen.
Slate.
Winkler.
Slate.
Bonoff.
Slate.
Clausen.
Slate.
Eakin.
Slate.
Franzen.
Slate.
Kent.
Slate.
Miller.
Slate.
Nelson.
Slate.
Ortman.
Slate.
Peterson.
Slate.
Pratt.
Slate.
Sharon.
Slate.
Sparks.
Slate.
Madam Chair, in the House, the slate received 16 votes. In the Senate, the slate received 12 votes. There were no dissenting votes.
So members, in the first district, Simonson and Simmons are the slate, and they will be recommended to the joint convention. With that, we'll move on to the fourth district. Is there a report for the fourth district? Do we have that for us? Oh, we wait. Yeah, we're going to, I'm sorry, members, we'll hear from the candidates first. Are there any nominations for the fourth district? Seeing no nominations, Mr. Beeson, please come forward. Chair Beeson.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, and members of the Higher Education Committees, my name is Rick Beeson. Thank you for the opportunity to present my credentials for re-election to the Board of Regents representing the 4th Congressional District, and a shout out to the RCAC members for their great public service. 6 years ago, I sat here and pledged, if elected, I would commit my energy and talent to improve this most important of state institutions. I've kept that promise, and now I ask for your consideration again in 2015. There's much unfinished business to complete, and I have the experience and skill to bring about sustainable change and to execute on plans now underway in the Twin Cities, along with our system campuses and other facilities throughout the greater Minnesota. I'm a product of a Minneapolis working class family. My father was a veteran in the Air Force and attended the university under the GI Bill. My wife and I have been married 33 years and raised our family here in St. Paul and have 2 delightful grandsons. I've been in leadership positions in both the private and the public sectors, including 27 years at Sunrise Banks here in St. Paul, and that includes 20 years as president navigating recessions and booms and busts, working with thousands of small businesses and families in a personal, caring manner. I understand risk and reward and expense management and investment. I've also engaged in civic leadership through service on over 30 boards in the St. Paul area, including the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce. I've been fortunate to have had a deeply meaningful and connected leadership career in and among the various sectors, with, of course, now 6 years at the center of the country's 5th largest research university, the University of Minnesota. I adhere to basic principles of governance, which are particularly critical to an institution as large and complex as the U. I have both managed and governed, which provides me clarity of these distinctive roles. Hiring and overseeing a president is, of course, the single most important act of a regent. As only one of several remaining regents who have been involved in the selection of Dr. Eric Kaler, you should evaluate my performance in part through that lens. I submit that we made an outstanding decision. The president's entering a critical period of his tenure, and I expect to play a pivotal role in helping him accomplish the goals outlined in our recently approved strategic plan. I also hope to continue to work with our colleagues, many of whom have experience of 4 years or less. As regents, we're expected to be informed and sympathetic on hundreds of often emotional issues, and always ones involving people in some manner, whether that's faculty, staff, the public, or stakeholders. We have processes and systems in place to fairly and sensitively address all of them. But as a regent as chair, I have to be most focused on strategic issues that will ultimately determine our success in the competitive and rapidly changing world of public higher education. In that regard, I focused on 3 critical priorities. Number 1, affordability and excellence through wise stewardship of financial resources, including the reduction of $90 million in administrative costs over the next 6 years. Second is improvement to our once renowned medical school and strategic development of with Fairview Health. I view this as the single greatest area of opportunity and need, and I've spent a great deal of time, and I'm pleased that this committee and the other candidates are talking about this. Third, planning for significant demographic changes through effective enrollment strategies and achieving diversity at all levels as quickly as possible. After 2 years, I was asked to chair the Executive Compensation Committee. I did. We completed that work. And then 2 years later, my colleagues asked me to serve as chair. This is a great honor and one which I've taken seriously. The university is a stronger organization by any measure or metric than it was 6 years ago, and we're more accountable to the many stakeholders, including you, the Minnesota Legislature. Thank you for your consideration, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Sorrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. It is truly a pleasure to be here, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this process, and I know I haven't had the opportunity to meet with everybody, but I hope to do that at some point in the future. So thanks for having me here, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this process. It is truly an honor. There are 3 things I hope to highlight here today. That's my leadership skills and accomplishments, my passion for higher education, and my passion for diversity, because I think that's a critical issue at the university. And I think there's a lot of elements to be looked at in that particular issue, and it's not obvious, but I think that's something that's holding us back and can move us to a different level. About myself, I'm not from Minnesota. I'm from upstate New York. My wife and I grew up in upstate New York in an area very similar to Minnesota. And we moved here in 2005, and we call Minnesota our home. We're proud to live in Minnesota. We're proud to be a Minnesotan, and we intend to stay here for a long, long time. I moved around the country many, many times before I landed here in Minnesota in 2005. I lived on the East Coast, the West Coast, and in the middle. And then I became the Federal Highway Administrator here in 2005 when I moved here. I think what I can bring to the board because of that is some different perspectives. I think by having that experience and working in different cultures, working in different environments, it's allowed me to have a collaborative spirit in environments that I need to collaborate in. And again, I think it provides some cultural competencies that I can bring to the board to move this diversity discussion forward. A little bit about some leadership experience in my background. Many of you know me as the former MnDOT commissioner, which I was proud to say I did for close to 5 years. It's one of the best experiences I ever had. But prior to that, I had a long career in USDOT. I spent close to 29 years in USDOT. And some of the highlights of my career, I happened to be the Olympic liaison for the preparation of the infrastructure for the 2002 Winter Olympic Games in Salt Lake City. So I was out there trying to build the infrastructure, not only for the athletes and the visitors to the games, but also for the communities, so that the projects we built left a legacy to those communities. It's a large collaborative effort, and I was very proud to be part of that, but it required some unique leadership skills. I also led a policy analysis office in Washington, D.C., and I worked on the Hill in various policy initiatives, and I tried to provide guidance on national transportation policy, and it was a phenomenal experience. I also had the opportunity to lead on a mega projects team while I was there, and these were projects that were over $1 billion, projects like the Big Dig. And one of my responsibilities with these big projects was I had to make sure these were projects that were being delivered with the utmost integrity. And I worked with the General Accounting Office. I worked with the Inspector General. I was staff to the suspension and debarment official at Federal Highway Administration. And our goal was to make sure that these projects were being delivered with the utmost integrity. And we took that very seriously, and that was our stewardship responsibility. So I was very involved with that. And then I moved here, and I became the Federal Highway Administrator, and I administered a $600 million to $1 billion program here with MnDOT and local government agencies. When I shifted to MnDOT, and you all know one of our biggest leadership challenges we've had in this state and in our country was the collapse of the 35W bridge. It was a terrible, terrible tragedy to work through, and I know many of you in the room helped me with that, and we worked together to respond to the bridge collapse. But during that time, my goals were to increase the morale of MnDOT. The morale was kind of in the tank at that point in time. My goal was to rebuild public trust in MnDOT, and then be open and honest and transparent about everything that we did. And ultimately, we needed to build a new bridge to help a community heal. And all this was happening in a compressed time frame. We delivered that new bridge in 437 days. At the same time, we're trying to heal an agency, we're trying to heal a community, and trying to rebuild public trust and confidence. So that was a tremendous leadership challenge, and it was a terrible tragedy, and I never wish this on anybody, but it really was a life-changing experience for me And I know for many people in this room to have to work through that. I also had a strong commitment to diversity while at MnDOT. I developed many diversity initiatives within MnDOT to make sure that MnDOT, the agency, tried to represent the communities we serve. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but it's a journey. I also develop external diversity opportunities with our minority contracting community. I developed a workforce collaborative with thought leaders in the community to try to develop the workforce for opportunities in contracting. And I think we made a lot of strides with that. And again, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but it's part of our diversity journey. I also was a leader in innovation, and I take that very seriously, and it's something that's very natural for me to be a leader in innovation, and there's many examples of that around our state. Something that's very technical, but it's a true sign of innovation. We walked a bridge down 35E and placed it on Maryland Avenue. We floated a bridge down the river in Hastings and parallel parked it and raised it, and now when you go through Hastings, you see a bridge in place that was built off-site, which is...
Mr. Sorrell, can you wrap it up?
Sure.
Thank you.
So I guess my commitment to higher ed, I've been involved with higher ed opportunities wherever I've been. I'm a servant leader with a passion for serving other people. And I want to close, I'll wrap up my presentation here by quoting something that kind of surprised me. One of the first things I did when I became MnDOT commissioner was get to know as many people as I could. And I found myself in the MnDOT library. MnDOT has a library that's an award-winning library, and I was talking to a person working in the bowels of the library about leadership. And what I found was she was a tremendous
Mr. Sorrell,
leader.
you're much over the time.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, but we got it. Thank you very much for your comments. Very good. So now, Mr. Beeson, if you two come back and we'll take our questions. We have 15 minutes because there's just the two of you. So who would like to begin with questions? Oh, before we do that, I do want to announce that the 4th District did in fact submit a letter, a report to the Joint Committee. Oh, I'm sorry, after questions, I apologize. Thanks for setting me straight. Very good. Good to have staff. Okay, questions. We'll open it up with questions. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we were talking about the 1st Congressional District, Senator Bonoff talked about the review by the legislative auditor and some of the comments that former Governor Carlson made. I was wondering if each candidate has seen those and if they could give their thoughts on that situation.
Chair Beeson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Pratt, we look forward to the review of the legislative auditor. My day job is working in both banking and then at the university, so I'm in 2 of the most highly regulated businesses next to nuclear power plants. So I live in the world of audit. I expect every audit to have findings and recommendations. In this case, look forward to having a third party look at this matter, and we'll work closely with the senator, the legislature, and with other parties in that regard.
Mr. Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. You know, that's a tough question for me because I wasn't there and I'm not in a position to prejudge. And I also am looking forward to the results of the legislative audit. I value those. I valued those when I was commissioner, and I need to see what those are. But having said that, what I will say is, whenever you find yourself in a crisis management situation, you can be broken down into 3 elements, and this is what we did with the bridge collapse. It's a different situation, but the scenarios are very similar in that you develop a response, you develop a recovery piece, and then you rebuild. And when you think about that, in the response piece, you got to develop an appropriate response, be open and transparent, and do your due diligence and research. Then move to the recovery piece and look at your processes and practices to see what needs fixing, and then rebuild whatever it is that you're trying to fix and rebuild relationships. And I think that crisis management approach seems very appropriate here as well. And you can't skip one. You can't move from one to the other. And that's something I learned through the bridge collapse, that I think can be applied here in this situation.
Next question. Representative Norton.
Sure, I'm going to go back to my earlier question with regard to one of the huge responsibilities of the Board of Regents, which is to work with the president to set a budget. And that budget needs to reflect all the needs of the university, and I know it's a very difficult task, but we've heard from our frontline workers that they're feeling the pinch of the budget, whether it be health care benefits, the Regents scholarships. There's a number of areas that they reported feeling. But, the other side of that coin is our administrative salaries, which are high, are of concern to many of the constituents in my district, and seem disproportionate when compared with frontline workers. And so I'm wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about your philosophy and how you might look at those issues moving forward.
Mr. Sorrell.
Chair, that's a great question, and that's kind of where I started to end my presentation, the ability to connect with people and not just connect and listen to people, but be empathetic. And I think that's what this requires. I think this is a discussion where there's probably a lot of balance that needs to be had here. But nonetheless, you can't ignore those concerns, and you have to be very empathetic to those kinds of concerns. And I have a history of doing that with MnDOT, the librarian story that I was trying to tell, the maintenance people, the very frontline people that have these strong stories to tell. We have to listen to those and bring them into the appropriate balance in a larger discussion to make the right decisions from a budget perspective. And I think that connection to people is very important, and again, being empathetic towards people and bring their stories forward. And working in a union environment presents challenges as well, but I think the same holds true. I worked at MnDOT where 90% of the employees were unionized, and I had to address these very issues, but I did it in a collaborative way, and at the end of the day, I think it made sense to do that, and we made some positive improvements within the context of the budget we had.
Very good. Mr. Chair Beeson.
Madam Chair, Representative Norton, I do worry about the pressure that we put on our working employees. We're asking a lot of them. They're doing more work. They're doing more complex work, and we have leaned on them during this recession. There's been furloughs. There's been freezes. There's been small wage increases. So as a general principle, I'm concerned about that, and I know my colleagues are too. They've also got escalating health care costs, and so in general, we have good employee relations. We've begun an employee engagement survey, so we can measure in total and by unit where people are feeling good and where we have problems. And we've got 250 departments. This is a far-flung empire of employees. In some cases, morale is very high. In others, it is struggling. So we are a people business. 75% of our costs are people-related. So at the end of the day, this is all about them being as productive and as happy as we can. Your other question about administrative costs really goes back to I was able to talk the president into putting a goal behind the savings, behind the operational excellence initiative that he began as soon as he came on, because I believe goals drive behaviors, and behaviors have the potential for changing culture. And ultimately, and this is what late Regent Larson talked to us about all the time, is changing culture as it relates to money management, as it relates to human development of folks. So at the end of the day, we're trying to change culture at the university, not just make a series of cuts and that come and go.
Senator Sharon.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed listening to all of the candidates as they've presented on various priorities. And I hear a great deal about the importance of, and I noticed this in some of the comments about the rankings and the reputation of the University of Minnesota's Medical School and Hospital, and concerns about the cost of education and containing the cost of tuition, et cetera. What I'd like to hear about, and what I hear about from my constituency, And I wonder if you share this perspective, and if you do, what you would do in your role as a regent to make certain that agriculture is a major, major industry as well in this state, is adequately supported, especially in the area of research by the University of Minnesota. And I'd like to know specifically if, based on your understanding of where things are going and the priorities that are established by the board, whether or not you think agriculture needs more attention and more support.
Chair Beeson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Sharon, one of the most significant decisions that was made by the President over the last 2 years was retaining the College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources, and there was pressure to save costs. We could have rolled the college up into the College of Biological Sciences, but the President made a very important policy decision, which the board supported, about keeping our historic presence in agriculture. We are a tremendous ag business state, obviously, and so part of the research opportunity going forward, not only in agriculture but throughout, is reestablishing relationships with our large corporations. And there is so much upside potential to do work with folks on food safety, on production. We're excited. We have 75 new industry agreements right now with businesses. A lot of those are ag-related. The President's on a regular calling program, and I've joined him with some of our large businesses and talking about their needs and our capabilities and matching those up. So I think research going forward is going to be heavily and should be heavily about the private sector, and it's a heritage for us that we certainly have to remember.
Very good. Commissioner Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. And I agree with Chair Beeson on that we need to do more, and I think we're headed in a good direction. But as I talk to people about agriculture and agricultural research, I think it's an opportunity that's there for the university, and I think the key to it is something Chair Beeson actually articulated, and that's the importance of the private sector. And to stimulate additional research in agriculture needs the support of the private sector, and it needs collaboration and partnership to do that. And so I think this is an issue that I've heard a lot about as I've pursued this region opportunity, and it's something that's kind of fascinating to me. And it's one of these things I think the onion needs to be peeled back quite a ways to figure out what the next step should be and whether we're taking the right steps. And I think the same holds true with STEM. I think there's a lot of STEM opportunities out there with the sciences, engineering, technology, and I think we haven't heard a lot about that here today, but I think that's an important area of focus for the university as well.
Very good. We have 5 more minutes. We're going to make sure we end on time so Representative Norton can vote before she goes and does her bill. So, very good. Other questions? Seeing none, I would just comment then again as I commented when we had Regent Simmons before us, that I did prefer, as we discussed, Chair Beeson, that we not have to take this vote until we had the legislative audit report out, but that didn't in fact happen, and so I'm have chosen not to ask any questions on that because I don't have that before us, and so I do appreciate your service, and I thank you too, Commissioner Sorrell. So now we will read the recommendation of the 4th District. This came from Alice Hausman. She was the chair of that, and the 4th Congressional District selected Richard Beeson as the recommended nominee for the region of the Minnesota to represent the 4th Congressional District. So with that, we will take the roll.
Nornis.
Beeson.
Barrett.
Beeson.
Bernardi.
Beeson.
Christensen.
Beeson.
Daniels.
Beeson.
Gruenhagen.
Beeson.
Heinzman.
Beeson.
Lean. McDonald.
Beeson.
Norton.
Beeson.
O'Neill.
Beeson.
Pulowski. Pugh.
Beeson.
Rosenthal.
Beeson.
Whalen.
Beeson.
Winkler. Lean. Pulowski. Winkler. Bonoff.
Beeson.
Clausen.
Beeson.
Eakin.
Beeson.
Franzen. Kent. Miller.
Beeson.
Nelson.
Beeson.
Ortman. Peterson.
Beeson.
Pratt.
Beeson.
Sharon.
Beeson.
Sparks.
Beeson.
Madam Chair, in the House, Beeson received 13 votes, Sorrell received 0. In the Senate, Beeson received 11 votes, Sorrell received 1.
Well, members, Chair Beeson will be recommended to the Joint Convention. So we have 2 more before us, and I think we can just keep going without taking a break. Members, obviously, get up and take a break if you need to. So now we will move to Congressional District 6. Congressional District 6, we have 2 recommended names from the RCAC. We have Mr. Michael Shu and Mr. Tom Anderson.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Steve.
Steve Laraway.
Good.
Are there any nominations? Right. So Mr. Michael Shu and Mr. Steve Laraway, do we have any additional nominations? Seeing none, we will start with Mr. Shu.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. It's an honor to be here today. It's also an honor to be the recommended candidate for CD6. I want to thank all of the CD6 members for your support. I've enjoyed meeting almost all of you here today. In all, I've met over 90 legislators, and I appreciate your time and your thoughts on the university and the job of Regents. I'm a graduate of the Institute of Technology, now the College of Science and Engineering, the university's second largest college. I later studied business at the University of Chicago. I'm the son of a professor, and I have a brother who is vice president of research at another Big Ten university. I'm very connected to higher education issues and have mentored many University of Minnesota students. I have a background in technology and management consulting, including working on strategy and operations assignments, as well as cost reduction and right-sizing projects for large Fortune 100 companies and governments. I'm very concerned about the cost of tuition and the impact on the middle class. In fact, when I met with all of you, I showed you a graph. Hopefully you remember. In this graph, it starts in 1960. It's 55 years of tuition history at the University of Minnesota for undergraduates and residents. In 1960, tuition was $213 per year. Adjusted for inflation, that would be about $1,700 today, an increase of 700% by 2014. Today, tuition is $12,000, which is 8 times the inflation-adjusted amount. The total cost of attendance is now $25,000 per year, a total of over $100,000 for a 4-year degree, and that's if you graduate in 4 years. Only 6 out of 10 do graduate on time. If you go 5 years, add another $25,000. 6 years, add another $25,000. Over 2 of 10 students never finish. The tuition freeze is a good thing, but it really is just a Band-Aid solution that doesn't change the underlying cost structure of the university. It's a special payment by you, the legislature, to keep tuition at $12,000 for residents. The cost is $14.2 million per year. However, tuition is still increasing by 3 to 3.5%, and the freeze will cost another $30 million per year if funded for the next biennium. And if and when the freeze is no longer funded, tuition will spike again. If tuition continues to rise at just 3% per year, it will be over $15,000 by 2020. That does not include other costs such as room and board, books, etc. Tuition for Minnesota students should be lower and more affordable.
In addition to lower tuition and administrative costs, I'm also concerned about transparency and accountability, research, innovation, and commercialization, diversity and access, and of course, university rankings. Retaining faculty in the medical school is the #1 priority. And student outcomes, including career advising and job placement. After all, students need good, high-wage jobs to service their student debt. The university is the state's most important asset and the economic engine for Minnesota. The university means a lot to me and my family, and I believe I can work with other board members to help the university create more value for all Minnesotans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Laraway. And Mr. Laraway, I do know you are the 6th district candidate, so welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, legislators, and I am indeed Steve Laraway, not Tom Anderson.
Thank you.
I have lived in St. Cloud for the last 24 years. I've been married to my wife, Peggy, for 37 years. We have 4 children, 3 daughters and a son and a grandson. Although I was born in Minneapolis and I spent some time living in Arden Hills, I really am a product of greater Minnesota because I've lived in Hutchinson, Wilmer, a lot of my life in New Ulm growing up, and now recently in St. Cloud. I learned a lot of lessons there, not the least of which was if you work, the harder you work, the luckier you get. What I did in New Ulm is when I was a high schooler, I started a lawn service business, had about 100 clients, and I used those funds to pay for my college education. Another significant experience that I had as I was growing up was the Boy Scouts. I was the first child in the family, maybe a bit naive, and the Boy Scouts opened my world for me. I was able to travel and do many things. It's paid me back in many different ways. After high school, graduating from high school, I went on to college and I graduated with an accounting degree. I then went to law school, passed the CPA exam while I was in law school, and left law school and took my first job with, you may have heard of them before, Arthur Andersen, as a CPA working in their tax department. I spent a couple of years there, and then I spent the next 20 years in the trust business, right down the street at First Trust Company, which is now U.S. Bank, at Bank One in Columbus, Ohio, and at Bremer Trust when I came back to Minnesota as president. I learned a lot there. I learned relationship skills. I was a relationship manager. I learned how to sell every single year our services. And I learned investment management as well. In 2001, I left Bremer and started my own firm with no salary. 2 children in college, and I learned this lesson. You have to, when you're scared and you don't have a lot of money, you work harder and smarter. My wife was an RN, so that helped a lot. She paid for a lot of the expenses. Today I have 12 reports, $250 million in assets under management. I've built that business one relationship at a time, creating trust in those clients. Some might call me a serial volunteer because I volunteered for all kinds of different organizations, community organizations, church organizations, all kinds. But the 2 favorite organizations that I volunteered in have been for youth and for healthcare. I've been involved, as I mentioned, in the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and the YMCA. I even coached high school girls basketball for a couple of years in St. Cloud. The last decade or so, I've been involved with CenterCare, which got me involved with the Minnesota Hospital Association. I served 6 years on the Hospital Association, receiving an award as Trustee of the Year in 2013. The 10 years that I spent at CenterCare have been a wonderful opportunity to learn healthcare governance. I learned about the highest ethical standards, that you were not a manager or a worker, you were a leader and you had to focus on governance, that you don't speak for the board, that the vote might be 8-7 in the boardroom, but you walk out of the room, it's 15-0. I understood that you represented every single entity, and CentraCare is a complex organization with 6 hospitals, 17 clinics, in 21 different communities, 9,000 employees, over $1 billion in assets. Why is it important to have healthcare experience on the Board of Regents, and why am I mentioning that? Well, to put it mildly, healthcare these days is a slippery slope. It's changing every single day. We now are reimbursed for value versus volume, and we're charged with the triple aim of making the patient experience better, improving community health, and cutting the cost. And I come from the board side of healthcare. The other candidates that we have come from the medical, the doctor side of things. It's a little bit different, because physician engagement is a key issue these days. So I want to thank you for the opportunity and consider voting for me. I do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand the gavel over. Which is good. You could tell I was getting tired and.
All right. We'll proceed now. We have, again, up to 15 minutes of questions. I emphasize up to 15 minutes. And we're waiting for the first one. Senator Sharon.
Thank you. How much do you think these private-public partnerships that I'm hearing about in the course of the conversations causes those who have those resources to engage in the partnership begin to control the agenda at the university?
Mr. Hsu, you want to go first?
I think it's something that has to be considered when you define the partnership. Obviously, when you have partners with deep pockets, they tend to try and control the game, if you will, or the relationship. And I think the university needs to be very careful when structuring those relationships.
Mr. Larraway.
I think it's all about the upfront discussion as you enter into those partnerships as to who has responsibility for what functions and what is the ultimate goal. But I think a lot of that you want to do up front so you don't get into the relationship and have problems later.
Senator Sharon.
Thank you. Do you think that the attraction of the resources to the university, I think in your role as the Regents, when you're talking about holding to principles and values of the university, that resources become important, and I really think the Regents do have to play a critical role, not just in defining the contract, but when looking at the opportunity for resources to make a decision, sometimes to make a decision to not accept those resources. So I'm curious about how you think about that component.
Mr. Larraway.
Senator Sharon, I do think that when you enter into those relationships, you want to work them out and want to make sure that there's discussions, and sometimes you have to walk away from bad situations if it appears that it isn't going to be beneficial, a win-win situation for everybody involved, the university as well as the entities that they're working with, be it in agriculture or in business. You need to walk away. That's tough to do when you have money on the table, but sometimes that's the best answer.
Mr. Hsu?
Mr. Chair, Senator Sharon, I agree. I think if you look back in history with the university, you should take a look at how partnerships were done in the past, what went wrong, what went right, what each entity is trying to get out of the partnership before you start it. You do have to walk away on occasion. There are a lot of bad deals out there, and the university has to be very careful to tie its name to certain types of things, whether it's a drug company or an agriculture company or a technology company for that matter.
That's it?
I could go on if nobody else has a question.
Representative Bernardi
Okay.
is waiting with the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to ask the question about inclusiveness and transparency. How do you see your role as a regent in ensuring that the voices and ideas of faculty, students, and the community actually are heard by the regents as they make their decisions, as they make their policy decisions?
Mr. Shu?
Mr. Chair, Representative Bernardi, I think it's very important to hear from everybody, and I would, if I were elected as regent, I would like to hear from everybody. There are a lot of views out there. I'd like to hear about those views before they come in and occupy an office at the University of Minnesota, because I think that's just bad press and it's unnecessary. And for the university to be ahead of those types of situations, I think is the best approach.
Mr. Laraway?
I think you'd want to determine in any situation or any question that came up, who are the stakeholders? And then you'd want to solicit input from the stakeholders. And I don't know if that's a one-on-one situation or if that's a couple of regents sitting down, or that might not even be the right protocol to do that. It might be somebody from administration to sit down and engage them, try to get all the stakeholders engaged so that they all feel part of the solution. I think that's very, very important. And I know at St. Cloud Hospital, which I served as chair, we did an engagement survey every year, and we define engagement as if you had an employee that would see some litter on the floor and they'd stop and pick it up. And that's the kind of engagement you'd want.
Any other questions? Senator Sharon.
Yes, I would also go back to the question I have about the role, what your view is of the university's role in the world of agriculture, with agriculture being a significant river of this economy of this state. We hear a lot about the medical community, but I haven't heard a lot initiated from the candidates about agriculture, and in particular, not just the industries that are in the metro area, but the actual production, the resources that the people who are growing crops and are have animals that they are growing, I guess you could call it. What we are hearing is that there's concern that the university does not appreciate agriculture at that level and has withdrawn over time its commitment to agriculture. So I just don't know, you may not agree with that. I'd like to hear your perspective about it and your perspective on where that fits in the list of priorities that you have.
Mr. Laraway.
Well, I grew up in an agricultural community in New Ulm, and while I grew up in town, many of my friends were farmers and in agriculture, and I know the importance, and I know the university was founded with a mandate to be involved actively in agriculture, and I totally support expanding that, working collaboratively with agriculture companies. And one thing that I heard numerous times, and it's a little thing, but I think this would be something that would be nice to do, is I heard that we don't have enough agricultural teachers. And in order to have a Future Farmers of America program, you have to have agricultural teachers. I think it's important to start, with those little things like that as well, and bring those forward.
Mr. Shu.
Mr. Chair, Senator Sharon, I grew up in Ames, Iowa. There's another land-grant university there, very focused on agriculture. I've been thinking about agriculture a lot, especially in the last hour. Food. And,
Me too.
And I have to say, food is very important. It's a very important resource for our world. We're talking about a population that's going to go to $10 billion, or 10 billion people soon. And I think the University of Minnesota should be a big player in that. We have Cargill here, we have lots of other Land O'Lakes, a lot of other agriculture-type companies here, and we need to leverage that opportunity because we have all of those resources and private companies around here that we can partner with. Goes back to the earlier question, if the partnership is correct, if it's right, I think we owe it to the citizens of Minnesota to try and exploit our knowledge and innovation in agriculture.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I think we'll proceed then to, before we vote, however, we do have a letter from the 6th District. They met yesterday morning, and the recommendation, considering the two candidates, the recommendation that they selected is Michael Shue, and Bruce Anderson was the chair of that delegation. With that, we will proceed with our voting.
Nornis.
Laraway.
Barrett.
Shue.
Bernardi.
Shue.
Christensen.
Laraway.
Daniels.
Sue.
Gruenhagen.
Sue.
Heinzman.
Laraway.
Lean.
Shue.
McDonald.
Shue.
Norton. O'Neill.
Shue.
Pulowski. Pugh.
Laraway.
Rosenthal.
Shue.
Whalen.
Laraway.
Winkler.
Shue.
Norton. Pulowski. Bonoff.
Shue.
Clausen.
Shue.
Eakin.
Shue.
Franzen.
Shue.
Kent.
Shue.
Miller.
Laraway.
Nelson.
Laraway.
Ortman.
Laraway.
Peterson.
Shue.
Pratt.
Laraway.
Sharon.
Shue.
Sparks.
Shue.
Excuse me.
Mr. Chair, in the House, Mr. Shue received 9 votes, Mr. Laraway received 5. In the Senate, Mr. Shue received 8 votes, Mr. Laraway received 4.
No, there's no need for a second ballot. Both both House and Senate have voted for Shue, Michael Shue. So his name will be advanced then to the joint convention. We have the 7th District left, and we apologize that it's taken a long time to get to you, but we have Thomas Anderson. Oh, I'm sorry. Any motions, any other motions for candidate? Seeing none, then we'll proceed with the two candidates brought forth by the committee, Thomas Anderson and Michael Yost. And I guess we're continuing alphabetical, so I guess Anderson is first, without a doubt. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recognize Senator Bonoff mentioned that she knows I've been staying in a hotel down here so much she changed my address. Thank you. Thank you for letting me be here. Thank you for allowing me to appear in front of you today. As you all know, all of the candidates for Regent have the qualifications set forth for what it takes to effectively set and administer the policies of the institution. Specifically, I've operated a business for 33 years, formed 4 startup companies, and have served as chair of the board for a large healthcare organization in western Minnesota that employs over 500 people in 26 counties. In addition, among other things, I've served on boards of chambers of commerce and economic development. I have the experience to look at the state of Minnesota in a very broad perspective. I know the 7th District, and I know its people. It's a district that's both large and very diverse. A district that contains 17 colleges and universities. A district that employs tens of thousands of healthcare workers. A district that is home to hundreds of large and small manufacturers. A district that is heavy in tourism, and a district that counts agriculture as one of its economic engines. I not only know the district, but I will bring the passion and desire that I embrace to once again make the University of Minnesota system relevant to the people of the district and the lives of everyday Minnesotans. Not only will we as Regents be challenged to balance the needs of 63,000 students, but we'll be challenged to balance their needs in a diverse system that includes a hospital system, an enterprise system, a philanthropy system, and more. And we must fit all of that into a budget puzzle that must be fair to the taxpayers of the state, be fair to the tuition-paying students, and be fair to the mission of the People's University as defined by our land-grant charter. I can accept that challenge. The University of Minnesota is different things to different people. To a small business in northern Minnesota, it's the innovation from the Venture Center that allows it to continue to employ 300 people in that small community. To Barbara, a legally blind lady from my church, it is a hope that through the research she is currently taking part in at the U, that she will someday be able to reverse her degenerative sight issues and be able to see her grandchildren for the first time. To Jeff, my banker in Alexandria, it is the knowledge that without the university's Masonic Children's Hospital, his 2 children would not have survived. And to Julie, a single mother and second career recent graduate of the mortuary science program, the university is the opportunity for a higher income and a better life for her daughter and herself. You see, the University of Minnesota has become relevant to those people. My passion comes from the fact that without the University of Minnesota in my life, I would not be standing in front of you today. In 1963, I had life-saving heart surgery performed by Dr. C. Walton de la Haye, namesake of the university's Heart Institute. I thank God every day for being born in Minnesota, in the backyard of the University of Minnesota, because it is the only place in the world that could perform that surgery on a 5-year-old at that time because of the research they were doing here. If you want to talk about the University of Minnesota being relevant to the people of my state, talk to my 2 college-age boys, because without that surgery, they would not be on this earth. I understand the workings of the university, and I also understand the relevance of the university to the people. The university can be relevant to the citizens of our state in many ways. First and foremost, we see it being relevant by providing the education needed to acquire the necessary employment skills in society. It can be relevant by some by making healthcare discoveries that can change their lives. And it can be relevant to others by inventing an agriculture product that may improve fertilizers and make drinking water safer for all Minnesotans. Over time, the luster of the University of Minnesota has suffered. That hurts me because I'm a student of history and I'm passionate with the knowledge of what the university can do for its people. I will work to return the luster to the People's University so that all Minnesotans can be proud of what is happening on campus. I will tell you today that if I am selected a regent, I will be the conscience that makes sure the Board of Regents is fair and just to the taxpayers of the state of Minnesota. I will be the conscience that makes sure that the Board of Regents is fair and just to the tuition-paying students of the state of Minnesota. And I will be the conscience that makes sure that the Board of Regents is fair and just to the mission of the University of Minnesota. I come before you today and humbly ask for your vote as a regent to the University of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Michael Yost is next. Welcome to the committee or committees.
Good evening, chairpersons and members of the committee. It's a privilege to be considered for the University Board of Regents. I have a passion for the university, its heritage, traditions, and what it's done and can do for the people of Minnesota. This is a common denominator for all of us running for the Board of Regents. I've been able to meet with most of you. Most often asked questions were, why do you want to be a regent? What are your qualifications? And what do you believe are the challenges facing the university? I've been fortunate to do many things in my career. I'm proud to be a fourth-generation farmer, but my experiences go far beyond production agriculture. I've led state and national trade organizations, served on National Department of Agriculture and Department of Energy advisory committees. During my tenure at USDA in Washington, D.C., I was the Associate Administrator of the Farm Service Agency, an agency that has a broad domestic agenda with a budget and billions of dollars that serve producers in all 50 states. As the Administrator of the Foreign Agriculture Service, I was responsible for a staff with offices in 90 countries working on a wide range of issues from trade and food safety to war reconstruction and food aid. During my time at FAS, we reorganized a federal agency that had a 20th century structure with outdated management and brought it into the 21st century. We eliminated layers of management, broke down rigid reporting silos, resulting in a nimble and responsive organization much better suited to operate today's technology-driven world. The University of Minnesota is the flagship of higher education in this state. It is a great institution, but it's not without its challenges. How can tuition costs be kept under control? What can we do to keep student debt at a reasonable level? And are we graduating students that are ready for today's jobs? How's the university going to attract research money, keep young scientists from leaving for the private sector, and reinvigorate outreach efforts in order to touch the lives of all Minnesotans, especially among our growing immigrant population? I don't pretend to have all the answers of what the University of Minnesota should do. All of us would agree when it comes to running or governing an institution, perception is not always reality. As the Board of Regents moves the university forward, they have to take into account three major forces that are driving both society and the economy: technology, globalization, and consumer preferences. If the University of Minnesota is going to continue to fulfill its mission of a land-grant college, it will need to take these forces into account. Simply increasing revenue is not the long-term answer. Structural changes are needed. Leveraging resources of both the private sector and other public institutions will have to be enhanced. The flexibility and the skill sets of the faculty and staff may be required to change, and the needs of the students and the people of Minnesota can constantly evolve. Because of my background and life experience, I believe I would be a solid addition to the Board of Regents. As a regent, I would strive for accountability and transparency because that equals credibility. I have the energy and passion to push the university forward in the 21st century. I want to become a regent of the University of Minnesota because I know what a difference it's made in my life, my family's lives, my friends' lives, and most importantly, what a difference it can and should make in the lives of all Minnesotans. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yost. Mr. Anderson, come back to the table. And we'll be taking questions now. Yeah, just for your information, there was no recommendation from the 7th District in this particular contest. So, who has the first question? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Chair Nornes. I heard you speak about the 21st century, and my question is, how do you think it's what is the best way for a legacy university like the University of Minnesota to move into the 21st century in the new models of higher education? We're seeing MOOCs that are radically transforming the higher education experience. And I'm wondering, how is the University of Minnesota going to adopt and change and have a successful business model in the 21st century when we are seeing a significant, really innovative disruption of higher education with the digital technology and the digital education that is being offered by top-notch universities for free across this nation. And so how is the University of Minnesota going to compete successfully in this 21st century environment?
Mr. Yost.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nelson, we're going to have to incorporate some of that technology into our structure. We're going to have to go out and find people that are able to do that, both staff and faculty, willing to do it. And it's what's happening across the entire economy, across the entire world.
Could you repeat the question? No, I'm just kidding.
That's a long question. Okay, thank you.
Actually, one of the things, very brief, it was a long question. You had multiple things I could answer on. I have college-age kids, and they're learning. My oldest son is in college, and he's going to go 3 years to college because he took PSEOs and dual credits and things like that. We have to, the revenue side, we have to look, some of these kids are only going to go 3 years, but in the actual education, I think online learning is maybe, as much as some of us don't love it so much, is the way to go. I know there's a nursing program where it's a second vacation for working mothers. They're taking the learning online and then coming to campus like 3 or 4 days a month to get the clinical. And I think there's going to be some of that collaboration, maybe with hospitals, maybe with whatever, but it's a different type of learning.
Okay, Representative Bernardi, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to ask a question about decision-making. I believe that not all decisions come from the top down, or sometimes in organizations they might. But I think bringing people together and get the collective wisdom of faculty and students, and actually the community, is very, very important. What kind of region style will you have to encourage that kind of engagement and that kind of listening to really bring about important decisions and changes to the university?
Mr. Anderson.
Chairman, Representative Bernardi, you know, I think I've served on several boards, and one of the things I've exhibited or I've seen over the years in decision-making process, and I've told a couple of representatives and senators this, is, for instance, a school board, if they're on this end and the constituents are on this end, you're elected to serve in the middle, and you have to go both ways, not unlike your jobs. I see so often, I don't think there's anything evil in it, but I think school boards will get their board members to go on retreats and teach them, the management teaches them, and what ends up happening is that the board members evolve over to almost on management side, when they need to really work really, really hard on being in the middle. And that being in the middle means getting management's opinion on some board decisions, but getting constituents' opinions on some things too. And I think that is something I've worked very hard on other boards to do, and I'll continue to do as a regent.
Mr. Yost.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bernardi, I don't know everything. I need to reach out to people to find out what they're doing, what's on their mind. You can make much more informed decisions if you know what's on the people's mind that you're going to affect. When we reorganized the Foreign Agriculture Service, the first time in 53 years it was reorganized, we met and met and met because I wanted to find out what was on the people that worked in the agency's mind, how we could do a better job, how things worked. Obviously, at an institution as large as the University of Minnesota, you can't talk to everyone, but you certainly can talk to groups. You can make yourself available, and you can make a better informed decision. That has been my style, both in the private and public sector, and it's served well.
Looks like McDonald down there. Representative McDonald.
It is McDonald. Thank you, Chairman. There's a big push and a revolution to fill the gap of the skills gap that we have in our country. We've been pushing for four-year education and neglected the two-year schools and the trade schools. We have a big gap in our industry. And here at the legislature and through schools all over the state, we're trying to get our minds around it and encourage students to learn a skilled labor, go to a two-year college or a trade school. So we're going to compete with the university. What is your position? Do you think that you'll have a pushback, or you'll join the revolution of steering people to a trade so we can fill that labor that there's a huge chasm out? Will you join the revolution or compete against it? Is that a fair question?
Mr. Yost, we'll let you go first.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bernardi, at the risk of being a revolutionary, Donald, I'm sorry.
It's a compliment. You better look at me.
Sorry. Obviously, everyone can't attend the University of Minnesota, and if you look at what the market's calling for, they're calling for a lot of people in the trade industry. I can cite several examples, whether it's welders, mechanics, et cetera, et cetera. Clearly, I'm an advocate of post-high school graduation. I encourage people to go to trade schools, and those that want to pursue higher education go to a four-year college. But I'm with you 100%.
Mr. Anderson?
Chairman, Representative, I'm asking to be a regent, but I'm a huge advocate of vocational education. Since we had our RCAC interview, Senator Bonoff brought up Alexandria's new high school, and we're all proud of that in Alexandria. One of the things we've done in Alexandria is the new high school, the center point virtually is vocational education, where the 9 or 10 large manufacturers in the community have brought in state-of-the-art machinery for the high school kids to learn on, and then the technical college can place those instruction in the college. So the kids have a seamless, the kids that would like a vocational education, they can have a seamless course from high school to technical college to the career. And I think there's many good careers that only take a 2-year education, so I'm on the revolution.
I want to vote for you both.
Okay.
Representative Lean?
It's late.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of in that same vein as far as workforce development things, and I certainly could ask this of any of the Regent candidates, and I think it's something that we as members of the Higher Ed Committee, as well as the University of Minnesota folks, the MnSCU folks, I think all really need to be thinking about. But I wanted to ask it of you gentlemen based on a conversation I had with some folks at the University of Minnesota Crookston. And it relates to a sort of pipeline program they have right now for their pre-med students, where folks are able to take some classes at the Crookston campus and then, you know, kind of have that pipeline down to the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus for their, you know, advanced education, moving to that medical degree. So something I had asked some of the folks at, excuse me, at the Crookston campus was, you know, if we're thinking about new dollars going into higher education, ultimately, what's going to be more effective? What's going to be more beneficial for the students? Dollars on the front end to help out with tuition, student debt, the cost of education, or programming dollars, maybe even you could say dollars on the back end, I guess, helping students get that vocational training, get that path into employment.
Mr. Anderson?
And you may, Mr. Chair, Representative, you may be talking to different students there. Some may want the tuition up front, and some might want the, you know, they go to a 4-year school. Someone might want the vocational education. One of the things where I thought you were going maybe with the question was, I know the university has some, for kids to save money, they have some what are called guaranteed entrance to the university. You can go to a MnSCU school for like 2 years, and if your grade is high enough and everything, you're guaranteed then to be able to come into the University of Minnesota. And I think that's good politics. I agree with you. The question got a little away from workforce development, but workforce development's a big issue in rural Minnesota.
Mr. Yost, you haven't responded.
No.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
I sometimes lose track, but I didn't think I heard your voice. So, do you have a follow-up, Lean?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess just to clarify, thinking about new dollars for higher education, I mean, you know, in the best interest of the student, and I propose this to the folks at Crookston, you know, what, I guess, in your minds, would you prefer, dollars to go into tuition relief, the cost of education, or dollars to help students find that career, find that vocation after their education?
We'll go back to Mr. Anderson again.
Thank you, Representative Chair. I understand the question a little better now. Where would I put the dollars into the tuition? You know, just ask me right off the top, I hear so many kids and their parents talk about the cost of college education and going into debt. I think I would, in that vein, put it in tuition. And in the same vein, I'd put it into lower education. I'd put it into the first 3 grades where we got to teach the kids to read and write arithmetic. But in your question, I'd get the kids their tuition money first.
Mr. Yost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lane, I'd put it in tuition. But you've raised a very good topic, counseling for young people, what they should go into. You know, I've got a friend that got a philosophy degree from the University of Minnesota. Not very marketable degree. He's been in a trade ever since he graduated from college. I think it's great to expand your horizons as a student, but at the end of the day, you may have to pay back loans. You may have to make a living as life progresses, and counseling is important. But I would put it in tuition. Specifically.
Senator Sharon.
Thank you. As new regent, if I could listen in to a regent's meeting, what basic assumption or paradigm would I hear you ask the university to reevaluate that has formed a direction or a policy that they are following at the university? What paradigm, what basic assumption that's just accepted and then drives all decision-making would I hear you ask for reexamination?
Mr. Yost.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, sometimes I don't know where to ask because I'd be full of questions. I think it's, you know, why are we doing it the way we're doing it, very broadly. But I think we need to start talking about all the colleges we have, the structure of those colleges. Do we need them? Are we going to need people in Minnesota? Going to need them as we move in the future? I think some very basic things have to be looked at. I think the President Keller and the Board of Regents are off to a good start, but I think we need to keep pressing that, and that's what I'd like to do. Just why are we doing it the way we're doing it? Why is it structured the way it is? And looking forward, do we need to change that structure, and what type of people do we need to have on the staff and faculty to complete our mission?
Mr. Anderson.
Chairman, Senator, it's interesting, and it's going to sound really strange with the way I just answered Representative Lean's question. Today, you know, the paradigm I always hear is tuition must go down. Tuition must go down. I had my mind open today in a discussion with a gentleman who said, have you ever thought about the tuition going up? We've got 44,000 students that apply for the University of Minnesota. We accept 20, 6 come to campus. He said if 44,000 are applying and we're only taking 6, does that not show a demand? Maybe you could get more tuition if the university had higher perception in people's minds. You know, I'm not saying we're going to be Harvard, but so I'm one that's always advocated tuition should be low. You just heard, but it opened up my mind, just that discussion. So I guess that's a paradigm where, you know, the University of Michigan did that. And the tuition is about $35,000 a year. I don't have the answer whether it's working or not, but they have done that. So I guess that's a paradigm I guess I'd look at. Thank you.
Time for maybe one more question, if there is one. Oh, has to be a 10-second question. I guess we don't have one. So thank you both for waiting this long, and we'll move on to actual voting. Again, there was no recommendation from the 7th district, 7th congressional district.
Nornis.
Anderson.
Barrett.
Anderson.
Bernardi.
Anderson.
Christensen.
Anderson.
Daniels.
Anderson.
Gruenhagen.
Anderson.
Heinzman.
Anderson.
Lean.
Yost.
McDonald.
Slate. Senator, you said I could do that.
That was my motion.
Anderson.
Norton.
Yost.
O'Neill.
Anderson.
Pulowski. Pugh.
Anderson.
Rosenthal.
Anderson.
Whalen.
Anderson.
Winkler.
Yost.
Pulowski. Bonoff.
Yost.
Clausen.
Yost.
Eakin.
Anderson.
Franzen.
Anderson.
Kent.
Yost.
Miller.
Anderson.
Nelson.
Anderson.
Ortman.
Anderson.
Peterson.
Anderson.
Pratt.
Yost.
Sharon.
Yost.
Sparks.
Yost.
Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair, excuse me. In the House, Anderson received 12 votes, Yost received 3 votes. In the Senate, Anderson received 6 votes, Yost received 6 votes.
Which means we'll be voting again. And we're ready.
Nornis.
Anderson.
Barrett.
Anderson.
Bernardi.
Anderson.
Christensen.
Anderson.
Daniels.
Anderson.
Gruenhagen.
Anderson.
Heinzman.
Anderson.
Lean.
Yost.
McDonald.
Anderson.
Norton.
Yost.
O'Neill.
Anderson.
Pulowski. Pugh.
Anderson.
Rosenthal. Whalen.
Anderson.
Winkler.
Yost.
Bonoff.
Yost.
Clausen.
Yost.
Eakin.
Anderson.
Franzen.
Anderson.
Kent.
Anderson.
Miller.
Anderson.
Nelson.
Anderson.
Ortman.
Anderson.
Peterson.
Anderson.
Pratt.
Anderson.
Sharon.
Anderson.
Sparks.
Yost.
Mr. Chair, in the House, Anderson received 12 votes, Yost received 3 votes. In the Senate, Anderson received 9 votes, Yost received 3 votes.
Excuse me. Congratulations, Mr. Anderson, and thank you for everyone staying this late, to all the candidates, to the committee, to all the members. We thank you very much. And I believe with that, we're adjourned.
You did that.